to really sort of consider, like, is X, in this case we'll say gaming, a problem? Is it actually infringing on other areas of a person's life?
Yeah.
Are they still going to work? Are they still upholding social connections? That includes on the game, by the way, because, you know, for anyone that missed 2020, a lot of people doing stuff online. You know, we weren't allowed to get together offline. So, you know, that's how we stayed connected.
Yeah, so we were already well rehearsed for that, so it's fine.
People always say things like, oh, you know, screen time is terrible, it's bad for well-being, mental health, you know, it's affected, so like social media. Think of the children is the common one, because that's the kind of rallying cry that people can behind. So you do, you know, there are sadly lots of books and media and articles like, my child played this and now smashes cars with a cricket bat.
Yeah.
You know, like, of course, the people are going to imply negatives and assert the correlation and the causation. You know, even in my own experience, it's like, oh, well, is this game too violent to let little Chris play?
So Chris, welcome on to the podcast. It's good to finally see you face to face, you know, the 2021 edition of face to face anyway. Could you give us, obviously, we're going to be talking about the prime topic today is going to be mental health and video games, which is two things that I'm extremely excited about. In fact, it's the whole reason I came on Twitch, only I kept the mental health, but dropped the video game side of it. So could you give us a bit of an intro to yourself and kind of like about leading us up to kind of where you are in your current academic life as well?
Yeah, I mean, like this introduction, I've kind of mastered it a little bit, so if you want to like go grab yourself a cup of tea, like I'll be here for a couple of minutes.
I'm good. I want to hear it.
But yeah, so my name is Chrisotpher Leech. I'm a first year, soon to be second. It's in January, so it's actually quite close. Year PhD researcher up at Edge Hill. I'm looking at my PhD's in psychology, looking at video games and mental health. But about me, sort of, you know, and sort of a bit of the process, really, you know, that is the main thing I do. I'm very privileged in that the position I have is a graduate teaching assistant. So it's a funded position. So I also do some teaching, which is exciting and very new to me. Alongside that, like professionally speaking, I am the SciPag cyber psychology rep. So the SciPag is the Psychology Postgraduate Advisory Group. So a collective of psychology postgraduates that try and help others and sort of shape sort of things with the British Psychological Society, the BPS. The longer I go on, the more acronyms will accumulate. Keep a counter. So, like, you know, it's a representative for them for the cyber psychology section, because that, broadly speaking, is the field of psychology that I'm in, our interaction with technology, which includes video games. I'm also a student rep, like, within my university for postgraduates this year, and this year started up the Postgraduate Student Society, because strangely the uni didn't have one. So myself and the other reps kind of put that together as a, you know, because part of the postgraduate journey is that you'll get a lot of this where you're at home working. Before that was the sort of more common way of working almost, and it can be very isolating. So we wanted to find a way to bring people together in a social and relaxed way. Adjacent to that, you know, I don't like to use the phrase spare time, because I don't think that exists in my non-work time. And even then you can debate that there isn't much of that when you're doing a PhD. I'm also a content creator, so I do a bit of stream. I stream once a week. I'm sort of Chimp195 on Twitch and sort of in like other spaces. I sort of do generally sort of games. It's meant to be like a very sort of casual space, meant to be sort of very like fun. We can talk about stuff. And like, you know, I like to kind of prescribe it as like, this is the one, maybe 2 times a week I'll get to play games for a couple hours and share that experience, because I don't get to do that as much as I would like to. And adjacent to that as well, I'm very privileged to be involved with a couple of organizations. I'm a streaming ambassador in 2021 for TakeThis.org, an American mental health charity that focuses specifically to the gaming community. So game players, game designers, streamers. Safe in Our World, a UK organization that has a very similar mission statement and is a little bit newer. And most recently, I was very, very privileged to be asked to be a mentor in the Kind Creatives initiative, which is a group that is designed to help facilitate the exchange between people who are talking about mental health and engaging with this in any sort of form of media, and, you know, connect those people with people that want to pick that up and want to be able to start doing that. So yeah, quite a few strings there. I also, you know, because who doesn't in 2021 have a podcast myself, psyched to be with you. It was just meant to be like a joke between me and a few of my friends saying we should like chronicle where we're at with our PhDs, like our journeys. and sort of like time capsule them and then come back to them when we finished to almost laugh.
Yeah.
And I kind of put the idea out to the Twitterverse, and like people were like, yeah, I'd be up for this. And it just became like let's sit down with people, talk to them about who they are, what they do, and why they do it. Because I think, we can very easily get stuck into that. Well, this is what I do, this is what I'm doing, and sort of, but not the why, and sort of, getting under that sort of layer a little bit. And, a lot of the time through my experience so far is people are really motivated and very passionate about what they do, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. A bit more like demographics about me. I'm a person with albinism. I'm severely sight impaired, visually impaired, legally blind. Any of those are sort of, applicable in that sense. So I'm very, very passionate about inclusion and diversity, particularly from ableism and talking about disabilities, as well as obviously working in mental health. Very passionate about mental health. As we'll get onto shortly, I'm looking at particularly student mental health. As a person with lived experience of mental health, particularly as a student, it's something I'm very passionate about. And, I actually have a background in media, believe it or not. I did that in college. So like 16 to 18 education over here in the UK. So like, it's kind of funny how like then starting this journey, everything just kind of melded together and came to fruition very, very quickly. Yeah. I started streaming this year, like January 2021, because I thought I've just started this PhD. I know, let's pick up another side career as well. That's fun.
Yes, I in this spare time that doesn't exist.
Yeah. I very much want my cake and I want to eat it twice. That's me in a nutshell, I guess, for better or for worse.
So what was it that led you into specifically choosing this as the topic of your PhD?
I'm very, very lucky, and I sort of touched on this being a graduate teaching assistant role. It's my own idea. So it's a proposal that I built together along with my supervisory team and sort of like built it up and applied. So to go back a little bit, let's talk about my undergraduate course was forensic psychology and criminal justice. So sort of colloquially criminal psychology and sort of looking at the justice system. So it was very, very interesting. I mentioned that I did media. I was doing media. I wanted to be a film director at one point. I just love film. And then not quite as happened just yet, but when you start working with something, you begin to love it a bit less because it becomes work, not pleasure.
Yes. I have done that with every single one of my passions.
Yeah, that happened. And I remember really vividly this conversation with my tutor at the time. She said, okay, look, UCAS applications are due in a couple of weeks. We need to get them done, dusted, finalised. You need to know your choices. For those that don't know, UCAS is like the system at which we apply for universities in the UK online. And I was like, okay. And I went home and had a 3-hour epiphany, a 3-hour chat with my mother. And I said, look, I don't think I want to do media. I don't think I want to go and study at university. I don't think it's for me anymore after 2 years. What else could I possibly study? And we talked about it. And I had an interest in law, like in the justice system, just generally. I think I found it interesting. I legitimately would say games like Phoenix Wright. I know it's very anime and very over the top, but like just understanding how the justice system works beyond like the courtroom, if you will, was interesting. And I kind of always had an interest in psychology, like why people do things at a very, very sort of basic level. And a quote from my mother that I always love is that I must have been the only teenager reading Freud for pleasure. Because I was like, I was in a bookshop one day and was like, Freud, the key ideas, an introduction to psychology. I was like, that seems legit. Check that out. And then I was like, okay, so I found these two things. I knew I didn't want to do like straight law. That was just definitely not for me. And then lo and behold, found this course, psychology, criminal justice. I was like, that's the one. That's it. For my third year dissertation on that, I looked at video games and deviancy. And deviancy does not sound quite as kinky as it is. I'll promise you that. But that was the best term to describe. Because, we'll get onto it shortly. But the video game violence debate, I wanted to sidestep that and just say, okay, let's ask people about what they'd be willing to do in a game world and real life.
Yeah.
And had a very explicit, very, literally referenced definition of deviancy being acting outside of social or legal norms. So just very simple. It was undergrad dissertation, so the actual research quality was awful. But one of the findings that I did find was that people that reported to play more strategy games had a negative correlation to potential deviant behaviors. And so what that means in sort of English is that does maybe playing a certain type of game, strategy in this case, mean that you are less likely to do naughty things? And that got me thinking. That was like, that's a really interesting concept. And this was way back in 2015. I went straight onto a master's in health psychology, which I really enjoyed, and sort of took like a slightly different step that I looked at disability and discriminations. So I looked at sort of essentially the Equality Act and sort of breaking down sort of the most popularized forms of discrimination: racism, sexism, ableism, ageism, and asked people which they thought would be worse to be perceived as in various situations. Like, it would be worse to be seen as in work. And used a method to sort of basically, it's called paired comparison. So I'd give you two choices and say, pick one. And by picking one, you're implicitly giving away a bit of your bias.
Yeah.
And I took all that data and showed that to a couple of focus groups. And, as you might imagine, being perceived as racist was the highest on the charts easily. Yeah. Despite under UK legislation, all of those forms of discrimination being illegal.
Mm-hmm.
As you might also imagine, disabilities that have a very visible difference or a very noticeable difference were also quite obviously kind of picked up by participants, as opposed to invisible disabilities. Yeah. And then I kind of had a few exchanges, and the idea was beginning to develop of like, okay, well, in the UK, mental health is covered under disability. I sort of mentioned that I had lived experience of like ill mental health, specifically during my time at university. And I wanted to go back to studying video games. There's something that I've always cared about and just so interesting to research. And it was those two building blocks that really kind of went together of like, okay, video games, that really weak and non-significant correlation with strategy games, and, discriminations and disabilities, okay, let's put them together.
Yeah.
That kind of led to mental health stigmatization and what I'm calling digital games with a purpose. So, through just being a nerd and having an interest in this type of thing, I think particularly through sort of, I'm going to say maybe the entire tens, but maybe more so the latter half of it, the indie game boom happened. I remember being told once, Chris, don't go into video game development. Everyone who's working in it now is going to be in there for life. You'll never get a job. Then indie games happened. And we saw a shift into games that were telling these uniquely perspective stories, games about mental health, games about substance misuse, games about, other sort of really personal and sort of like also cultural significantly different things, like, games like Papa and Yo, Depression Quest, all games like that were beginning to blossom. And there's very, very little research that's done on that. I think, so a game with mental health, Hellblade: Senzuna's Sacrifice is a very, very popularized one, and very well, rightly so, applauded for the fact that they spoke to people with lived experience. They spoke to psychology professionals, psychiatry professionals, and built that into the game, so there's this like pocket of games, it's quite easy to bundle them in with the emergence of so-called cozy games as well. There's definitely this sort of gaming has become so much more diverse as in itself in content, right? And I was like, okay, well, student mental health is a problem in the UK. There's lots of statistics that just really highlight that it's a problem. It leads to dropout. It leads to students struggling. It leads to worse in some situations, which is obviously very dreadful, very upsetting. And, okay, we've got these pockets of games. Let's have a look at what the effect of playing these games might be on people. Yep. Does it, can it provide like, information? Does it change perspectives? It's not, I want to qualify, like, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not clinical psychology. I'm research, it's PhD. But it's not an intervention. It's not saying this game is going to cure everyone of everything, because that is a very far-fetched claim. But it's just there's no research on this. I might find nothing, but there's just very little actually looking at these type of effects. And getting people to play these types of games, generally speaking. So that's sort of this journey now.
Amazing. Just quickly cycle back to what you said. So basically about the strategy games and deviancy. So you said that essentially was the finding that people who play more strategy games are less likely, or like are more likely to follow the rules, are more likely to be well behaved overall.
If I mean, let's not oversell it. I think it was like a minus 0.3, and like an insignificant, like we couldn't apply it to the population. We can't say it didn't happen by chance.
Right.
sort of, p-value in the science terms. But it just was something that really stood in my brain. I was like, wait, I wonder if playing a certain type of game could have a potentially positive effect as opposed to a negative one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of my big key areas of interest with this is I call it having the right game for the right time. So, I have used video games as and many things over the years. I started playing them in the mid 80s when I was like 4 or 5. I played original Mario Brothers, and I played things like Asteroids and Pac-Man. They were all reasonably new. We had the whole Atari 2600 thing and all that stuff. And I've used them for a lot of things over the years, like for escapism primarily. And for me, one of the biggest moments of when video games were different was the first time I went into Warsong Gulch on World of Warcraft. And I'd played World of Warcraft PvE, so I've been playing against endless balls, to do the South Park meme, endless bars. I'd basically been killing endless balls and trying to level up and enjoying the game and finding it to be a great form of escapism. And then I went into Warsong Gulch, which is player versus player for anyone who doesn't know the game. And you are now currently playing against other people and their avatars and their characters, and now suddenly instead of it being a boar that's killed you and you're like, oh, another boar got me, you're now like this. And I literally remember the name of the first person. It was a rogue, and a gnome rogue called Joxer with 2 X's, Joxxer. If you're still out there, it's this is 20 years ago. But I've never felt such an adrenaline dump in my entire life, like this. So suddenly, for now, I was playing for a completely different reason, and it didn't come off at all that day because the adrenaline and the addiction of not maybe addiction might be the wrong word, but the desire to continue just another game was so much higher on player versus player than that. And I really have to nowadays think about, right, what game am I going to play at different times of day. So I quite like playing things like Call of Duty, despite the fact that it's lather, rinse, repeat every single year. I kind of like it and I enjoy that feeling, but I don't want to be playing that like 2 hours before bed. It's like that's Stardew Valley time. That's that's time for something else, or even kind of like I can do things like Hades and on a speed run, and I can do that before bed because there's still a very different kind of emotion in me playing against the computer as there is in playing against other people. What, in terms of, obviously, what have been some of the kind of findings that you've found so far on like different genres on like how does do different genres affect people's mental health differently? Has there been anything significant that you've come across so far that would suggest any of that?
I will be fair in that, like, that is not an area that I've looked at personally, particularly around genre. I think there are pockets of research on that type of thing. Unfortunately, there is a huge body of research and only limited time to sort of look at it. I think the right game for the right time of day, I think, is important. But to even draw it back another level, like people play games quintessentially because they are fun. It's something that they enjoy, whether that is overcoming a challenge, whether that is knowing that you are conquering your fellow person on the internet. Like I love like football games. I'm a big football fan. So you mentioned Call of Duty is like the same iteration, same thing with football games, right? I buy one, like I buy last year's one when it's like £5, never the new one because it's just a skin update really. And like Rocket League is one of my favorite games, and PvP is very different to PvE or against AI. But it's kind of like how you facilitate that. Like I play games primarily for fun, social connection. So I play a lot of games online with friends. So the game almost becomes secondary to just the social engagement, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like effects on players, there is a heck of a lot written about things like screen time. You mentioned the word addiction. That's very, very popularized, very feeds into the moral panic of games at the moment. I mean, depending on where on the internet you look, you can find to ensure you get a good night's sleep, you must have 3 liters of chamomile tea and sit in complete darkness and read a book 3 hours before you go to bed, and don't have caffeine after 2 p.m. and all these sorts of things. And the research, particularly around like screen time and stuff and all things like that, very mixed, very, because you kind of have to scale it back even further and say, like, the problem with moral panics is, and a moral panic is, society collectively worrying about something that's new, is that research is funded by lawmakers, policymakers, in the very general thing. And usually when there is a big panic about stuff, they will pump money into research that then will often find what was being looked for.
Yeah.
Right. This is a big problem. Again, video games and violence. I would recommend Dr. Christopher Ferguson and Dr. Patrick Markey's book, Moral Combat, which completely breaks down the argument of video games and violence. Very, very good book. These things aren't right, but then obviously it becomes very sort of socially canonical, right? It's a feedback loop. Like in ancient Greece, they were worried about writing. They worried that writing would make everyone dumb because they wouldn't remember things.
Yeah.
Moral panic about writing. Imagine that.
Well, I actually had a moral panic about writing shopping lists about 5 or 6 years ago because I could always remember everything that I needed when I went to the shop. And then I started forgetting things. And I was convinced, so this must have been passed down to me from the ancient Greeks. I was convinced that the second that I start using a shopping list, that's it. I'm not going to be able to remember anything anymore. So yeah, I can see how it happens.
In the Oxford Internet Institute, they're doing some really, really good research with Andrew Chabilsky. I've probably pronounced that wrong. I apologize. Known as NDP colloquially. They're producing some really good research on things like screen time and well-being, use of social media and well-being. And they're finding very, very small effects. Addiction is another area where online gaming disorder is defined by the WHO. NDP has been in repeated contact with them. Check his Twitter feed. It's glorious. And their actual response was, oh, yeah, sorry, it's really complicated, so we can't really explain to you, an absolutely almost legendary qualified professional, why we've included it. But it's in there. So people then picked it up and go, well, online gaming disorder is in there. And an example of someone, I forget the scholar's name, I think it's a gentleman from York who looked at a lot of gaming addiction. He's like, he sort of said, if gambling didn't involve money, real money, would we be talking about it in the same way we do now? Would we be talking about addiction if it was just for an e-currency that didn't exist? And really,
that's NFTs, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, let's basically. But when we talk about these things, there's clinical definitions of words like addiction, and there's the socially applied context to them.
Absolutely.
You get these kind of things. Oh, they're addicted to screens or games, and the literature. And again, this is where it almost becomes like a side picking thing, right? The most valuable skill I've ever learned throughout my education is critical evaluation. So I mentioned moral panics being funded, funding research through lawmakers that find what they want to find, is be critical of the methods. Ask yourself who's done the research and why, and who's funded it. I remember famously, it was like an episode of Question Time or something, and it was talking about the links between sugars and something like diabetes. It's pre-sugar tax. And there was someone saying, well, my piece of research found no links between drinking Coca-Cola and diabetes. And it was funded by a subsidiary of the Coca-Cola company.
Yep.
So that's not a surprising finding, right? Of course, those findings are going to be found. I will loop this back to gaming research because it's a really funny example. And then that's why there's a big replication crisis in psychology at the moment. We're replicating these studies that find these links and finding that they're not there.
Yeah.
So there's a big move now for what's called open science. I've done it with my first study. I've pre-registered it. So I have registered online a big document about detailing what I'm doing, exactly how I'm going to do it, what's going to happen with the data. So so if I fiddle with anything, I have to justify why.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to get my numbers and then find what I want to find. Yeah. And then actually the other part of that is releasing data publicly and saying, okay, this is what I found. This is how I've done it. You as another researcher, feel free to have a look, do it yourself, see what you find. In a bid to try and regain a bit of credibility, I guess, in the findings. And a lot of these big sort of pieces are finding very small correlations. And my favorite phrase is correlation does not equal causation.
Yep.
So, if in the summer, ice cream sales go up, right? We can kind of, we can assert that that's a fairly sort of common thing. Violent crime also increases in the summer. So we should stop selling ice cream, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Clearly, ice cream is these sugar-filled rages are causing violent crime.
There's a Daily Mail headline literally waiting to write itself there.
God, don't. But like that's kind of like the textbook example that's given to people like in stats. Like, correlation does not equal causation. We don't know why that is.
Yeah.
The Oxford Institute, it was the beginning of this year, they published their preprint, and I'm not sure if it's been fully published in a journal yet, but it made BBC News of, playing video games, and the two included in their study was Animal Crossings and Plants vs. Zombies, had a positive effect on well-being. So there's a positive correlation between playing those and well-being. And they were very explicit in saying, we don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just happier people play Animal Crossings. They were very clear about that. Like, we don't know why. But this was a huge finding for like the general media. Like, video games, not bad. That was, shocking. For me, the biggest shocker there was that the companies involved, Nintendo and EA, actually provided the data. The data is usually very heavily guarded for marketing reasons, for privacy reasons. But they actually supplied the data to the institute to run the research, and that was the big thing for me. So you kind of have to be scrutinize the research and really be able to look at what they're doing. The other problem with that is that you have this sort of academic ivory tower that, well, if say yourself, Dave, you wanted to read the latest research, it's going to be paywalled by a journal that would cost either several tens of pounds to buy it, or you'd have to go through an institution that are paying thousands of pounds. It's then going to be an academic jargon, and even I read papers and go, what are they even saying here? They really try to make it sound academic. So the big side of the movement there is like making science communication accessible. Everyone should be able to read my paper, whether that's because I do two different versions of it, whether that's because I disseminate it. I have conversations like this and talk about my research and say, well, yeah, this is the kind of thing we're looking at. I should be able to say that in a way that everyone should be able to understand, particularly when we're researching things that affect everyone. Like, why would I then like go to 3 years worth of effort and produce these studies and then never let anyone read them ever, or let anyone understand them? What would be the point in that? I'm not going to advance any science there. Circling background, so things like addiction, like everyone there's always going to be people that can use anything maladaptively. Like, you can use anything in a negative way, right? What's the old idiom, balance, moderation is always good. You can have too much of a good thing. Again, very common sort of publicly known stereotypes are students over the summer, they play more games, hours a day. Maybe it's because they haven't got anything else to do. To really sort of consider, like, is X, in this case we'll say gaming, a problem? Is it actually infringing on other areas of a person's life? Yeah. Are they still going to work? Are they still upholding social connections? That includes on the game, by the way, because, for anyone that missed 2020, a lot of people doing stuff online. We weren't allowed to get together offline. So, that's how we stayed connected.
Yeah, so we were already well rehearsed for that, so it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Uprising of the nerds, right? Like, is it affecting, like, are they eating great? Are they hydrating? Is the hygiene good? And, I've been that student. You have, an academic year traditionally for an undergrad student is, 9 months. You got 3 whole months to do whatever you want. Of course, I smashed hours into games. My own little student flat, no one nagging at me. Like, yeah, of course I put way more hours into that time than I did otherwise. But it wasn't having a negative impact on anything else. And that's a really, really big distinction that, doesn't necessarily always get pointed out. So the video game related thing, let's talk about methods, right? I'm not going to name any names because that would be unprofessional. But one of the famous sort of links is always looking at video games and violence. The first thing is they'll always look at games like GTA and Madden or FIFA. So firstly, you're comparing oranges and bananas, two very different fruit, right? And not to mention, I don't know about you, but FIFA is the game that gets me angrier than any other game.
Well, it's called FIFA Rage for a reason.
Exactly, right? Like, out of all the games I've played, including ridiculously explicit violence, it's FIFA that gets me angrier than anything else.
Yeah, right. I think so. I've definitely thrown more controllers. I miss them being connected to wires, so they didn't go too far.
You could just pull them back. Yeah. So this is a legitimate method, right? So you'd come in, you'd play one of those games, and they would say to you, okay, here's a hot dog, right? And some fries, some chips, right? Whatever. Here's some hot sauce. However much hot sauce you put on the food, the next person is going to have to eat it. And that was their measure of aggression. So, but like I like spicy food, so I go, oh well, they might like spicy food, so I'll dunk loads on it. I might also go, oh well, they might just want to eat this as is. I'm not going to put any on it. So just you just laughed out loud then, like that was their measure of aggression.
Yeah, well, it's preposterous.
You can
because you don't have to be that. You just have to be a prankster to want to give someone loads of hot sauce. That's not aggression. That's like. Can just be quite funny. Everybody loves watching kind of like Hot Ones and Wing Roulette and stuff like that. It's like you're not aggressive towards your friends if you kind of sneak a little bit of extra habanero sauce in on their Nando's. You know, for any of the Americans listening, we have to throw cheeky Nando's in there as an expression right now.
Cheeky Nando's.
But yeah, like I'm just like that. How aggressive I'm feeling, how cheeky I'm feeling would dictate how much I felt putting on. I'm a very considerate person, so I'd be like, I'll just put a bit on. Like
maybe that's the thing. Video games actually just make people cheekier. That's it. We've just fixed science.
Well, there we go.
It's cheekiness.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not. I imagine you've come across the experiment where they have to keep on giving the person shocks.
Oh yeah, I forget the name, but that's like
it's a very, very famous experiment that I should know the name of off the top of my head because I've referenced it a bunch of times. And they basically keep on giving shocks to the person until even though it was a fake shocker, like that's a little bit different. That's actual violence towards a person.
Well, in that study as well, I think what they were actually measuring was if you would listen to a person in power, because they're told by a supposed scientist, like, okay, we want you to dial it up and just keep providing electric shocks to this person. Unbeknownst to the participant, the person getting the shock, quote unquote, was a Confederate. So it was someone being paid by the study to act convulsively as if they were being shocked and screaming out in pain, regardless of the actual amount provided. So it was to kind of look at if the participant would listen to the person in power. Deeply, deeply unethical. Yeah. Ethics standards exist for a reason. And, even in my study, looking at video games and mental health, I had to build in many, many ethical safeguards just to get it approved, to demonstrate that, exposing people to mental health information could be potentially very triggering.
Yeah.
So providing them with the necessary resources, tools, and guides to deal with that, just this, and, being really meta, being really sort of critical, self-reporting. There's many people in the science community that say that actually it's really unreliable.
Yeah.
If you fill out a survey, which I'm sure something everyone who listens to this has done at some point, it might just be how you feel at the time. You might not be bothered. You might just do a pattern. All these things happen, and you kind of have to put those things in your mind as a researcher. Now, if you collected a lot of data, you would say that that general fuzziness, you'd kind of be able to work it out, because we look at, means and general. What we want to do is get as big a pool of data as possible to get the general population out of it. But, even things like aggression, like, like the types of questions being asked. Do you like to smash stuff? You kind of then have to say, well...
I like to smash a cheeky Nando's. It's all coming back. It's going full circle now. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, but you know what I mean? And like, even like there's a big argument in like certain areas of research that using certain types of language will affect how people will respond, because they don't want to be seen to be supporting something negatively.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons they say sort of like looking at things like racism is so difficult, because no one wants to be seen or considered racist.
Yeah. So
they will, I think it's called researcher bias. They will put what they think the researcher wants to get from that.
Yeah, 100%. There's always an element of what we think you're expecting us. The example I often use to explain this to people is I go, have you ever tried to win at an eye test? It's like, so you go in for the eye test and you're squinting and you're really struggling, but you want to get a line that you can't, so you kind of really guess at it. And the thing is, if you were to get that right by guesswork, you've now got yourself the wrong prescription.
Yeah.
It's like, so you've probably not, like, just for being competitive and wanting to answer these things correctly. Oh, the optician wants me to be able to see the bottom line. It's like, no, the optician wants to know what line you can see, so he knows which lenses to give you. So yeah. I always find
say, like, I go like 100 miles an hour. I've been obviously working on this for like 11 months now. So there's a lot of information in there, deconstructions of many, many things. Apologies if that's a lot of information, but it's all, you can't have one without the other. That's kind of the problem when you get into this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's good. So circling back to the experiment itself. So they play the game, and then they've got to basically decide after they've played the game how much hot sauce they want to put on for somebody.
Yep. And then how much hot sauce they put on, I don't know even if milliliters, grams, do they weigh the food afterwards? Do they just go, oh, that's a lot? And then they would say, well, this participant acted aggressively. I've seen other methods where it's like two Confederates are playing football, or American football, that sort of thing. And like, does the person rush to get involved? And, and all these sorts of things. And it's like, you're not accounting for so much. Like, does someone like hot sauce? That would be a really important factor to take into consideration. Does someone like team sports? Really, that's very likely to impact their ability to want to just join in with two strangers, right?
Yeah.
I've seen some other studies that involve like GTA and like actions in GTA, and it's like one of the conditions was where the participant watched a Confederate, so someone paid by the study to play the game and do certain things, and then gave them a control and said, there you go, mate, do you want to have a go? As if like just demonstrating to them isn't like that's not going to give anything away about the study, or it's not going to affect your data at all, is it?
Yeah, exactly. You've just demonstrated how to play the game. The person goes and copies what they saw, or like they've given them ideas of how to play the game. In terms of like any of the outcomes from all of that, like did they find anything significant? Did they find that like on the whole people who played video games to be more aggressive or anything like that?
Well, this has been like the long-standing kind of argument that yes, it does. The big long-standing argument throughout, since games began, like from the 80s right the way through to now recently. It's kind of shifted a little bit to screen time, and so that type of thing. It's been kind of included in that through the new moral panic of social media screen time. Video games have just been bundled in because, of course, they have. But that's over the past sort of, we're in 2020 now, right? Yeah. So past couple of decades, we've been getting this science that's been saying, actually, these links are just not there.
Mm-hmm.
Those methods are not reliable. There's too many things that could affect it. People have reran experiments, found completely different things. Therefore, that would say actually the finding you've got has either happened by chance or you may have made it up to suit your own gains. It's just, as I recommended it before, but like Moral Combat, Christopher Ferguson, Patrick Markey is a great book. It's very easy to read, and it just sort of destroys the entire argument. Basically, it just really, really breaks it down. The video game debate, which is co-edited by Dr. Rachel Coher and a German professor whose name escapes me, and I'm not very good at German. But the video game debate 1 and 2 also include chapters on this, and it just breaks the debate down. It says it's just nonsense. Basically, it's just nonsense. Now, a caveat to that, even in relation to my own research, it would be a very foolish assumption to say all these bad things don't happen ever.
Yeah.
So everything must be good. You know what I mean? I'm not sitting here going, well, clearly video games must be good for us then. The greatest likelihood really isn't, this is why I'm doing the science, is that actually, on the most part, there probably isn't an effect.
Mm-hmm.
Or we would call it maybe a null effect, that actually on the most part playing a game has as much effect on you as anything else does, in that life is made up of a series of very complicated and complex things. Everything affects people, that whole nature nurture debate, if you want to get really philosophical, and that people be complex and different but the same, right? So just anything, any given day can affect you, like mood changes.
Yeah.
So, things are going to impact you differently any given time, right? So it's important to be critical. And like, that's why people like me are doing the science, to find these things out and provide a springboard. I always like to call it like writing my own check, to then want to research it more and do more research and replicate my own experiments to see if there is a finding in a broader space. The romantic in me, I'm doing this because I would love to be able to say playing a digital game with a purpose actually was found to increase knowledge of ill mental health. So actually, could we look at making an intervention of some kind for students? Maybe you get given a game to play, but it finishes with, these are all the links in university to access wellbeing support. You know, that the big romantic dream, like I'd love to have my name attached to something that beautiful. Is it likely to happen? Probably not. Let's be honest. Yeah, I'm a PhD student. You know, still got a lot of data to collect and then to analyze. I could be wrong. As I say, you know, there might be no effect at all. But you've got to find out.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, anecdotally, you speak to any gamer, and there's very few gamers that are like, no, this is having a bad effect on me. A lot of gamers actually find it to be very, very comforting. And the thing about mental health is, obviously, we're not supposed to just go with anecdotal evidence, but, and I know what you said before, like a qualitative research on when a person's self-reporting, we always have to take that with a pinch of salt as well. But ultimately, when it comes to mental health, we're not looking at like white blood cell count. We're not looking at kind of disease markers. We're not looking at any of this stuff. We're looking at a person's subjective experience with the world. So if a person feels like a game is actually helping them, then it probably is. Even again, it might just be a superficial or a surface level. And I suppose it comes down to whether, you know, for that person, because obviously people escape and use and spend a lot of time in these things, and those things can have great broader aspects on their life. You know, if a person was to get lost in video games and end up losing out on anything else, like when we talked about an addiction before, if a person was to be so into video games that they lose a job, for example, now that's going to have, you know, financial implications on them and personal implications on them that actually might make their mental health worse by virtue of the fact that the person says, well, the fact that I've not got a job or the fact that I can't pay my bills is the reason that my mental health's taken a downturn. But if the reason that you didn't have the job or pay the bills is because you were spending too much time in a game, it's like, well, indirectly the game's responsible. So it's like how you even find where the kind of cause and effect is, I guess.
Well, again, it's causation. Like you could put in anything there. So is it a personal factor that's led them to just playing and in this case, it's a game. It could be people that sit and choose to play guitar for 14 hours a day. It could, you know, you can make that X and you can make that anything.
Oh yeah.
But like if X prevents you from getting to work, that causation is likely to have a negative effect. But it's like, can you blame X? You know, there's that, again, philosophically speaking, you know, you talked about positive effects, like even if it's just self-fulfilling prophecy, like placebo, if it makes you feel good, it makes you feel good, right? And you're not hurting anyone else. You're not having a negative effect on yourself. But in this instance, like it could be anything, right? Like, you know, we've all been in that one more episode.
Oh yeah.
Right. We've stayed up maybe a little bit later than we should, you know, but like, are we here getting the pitchforks out for TV shows? Like,
sometimes,
yeah, but you know, it's just not quite ethereal beingized as much as, you know, games are. Games take a lot of the flack, and games don't help themselves. We've all seen that like Dead Space ad where it's the grannies acting, looking at the violence and reacting to it quite a lot. That doesn't help. I think the industry has realized a bit more over the past like maybe 10 years, 5 years, that maybe that's not the image to kind of sell. I'm kind of aware of this now. And part of the big hope in like psychology is that we want to work with games companies and industry more to produce more ethically sound games, more socially meaningful games in like the right way. Because it's all great talking about these like digital games with a purpose and stuff, but content warnings are so important from an ethical game design point of view. Like if you're just including something for the shock factor, that shouldn't be in your game. It just shouldn't be. We talk about mental health representations in games. Oh, look at the horror genre. It's not easy to find a good example. Because they're bad. They're bad. The entire horror genre treats mental health awfully. And you can compound that with, well, if that's sort of the norm and that's the normal perception, you get stigmatization.
I think again, that's not just gaming that's got that problem. It's okay in order to have someone be a villain. If so, like we need to have something, you know, quote unquote, wrong with them. And forever, it's always been, well, what difference in their brain can we have to justify why this person could possibly be this way? And I think, you know, mental health has been used as a reason for that in stories for a very, very long time. We go back to like the Bible, like, because what was considered to be mental health back then was demonically possessed, right? If a person had bipolar disorder, I'm clearly demonically possessed by both like a really, really grumpy demon and a really, really hyper demon. So whichever one of them comes out at any given time. So I think that's something that I suppose storytelling has always used. It's like, well, we need to justify why this person is able to do this. It's like, oh, they're just a normal person. I think one of the I don't know if you've ever seen the film The Strangers. I'm going to give complete spoilers to the end of a 14-year-old film here, but it's like at the very end they just go, "Why did you do this?" And these people just go, "'Cause you were home." And it was just like, it's like, what? It's like there's no big, they've actually not put a big moral reason, or they've not talked about what's wrong with the people that have done this, are actually performing all these murders and such. In terms of like, what is the primary some of the primary questions you're looking to answer with your research?
Okay. I also just want to quickly pick that up because that is something you see in storytelling a lot. Like, all this, we have to explain why these things are. And it actually comes from like a style of storytelling that, we have to have these, it's called the Disney effect. There's a really, really good trio of episodes on Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, Revisionist History, that deals with this, and it talks about how, we get these polarized things that, well, good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. We make it very binary. And that's it. It's clear cut. The Little Mermaid, for example, that's the example they use, and they really go deep down into the philosophy of it all. Think about this, though. If you are a child and you watch that, and it tells you very plainly, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. Spoiler alert, but bad things can happen to children, and that's never their fault.
Mm-hmm.
But you could very easily internalize that and go, well, I must be a bad person, and think about the effect that could have on people.
Absolutely.
There is a school of fairy tales that actually has what you've described there, in that, oh, this happened just for no reason because life is probability and chance happens, and chance can affect everyone for better or for worse. I'm a big fan of dystopia. Sci-fi dystopia is a genre. And that too has this kind of, I won't do any particular big spoilers, like not like anyone hasn't read 1984 at this point, but like, for me,
I love a little bit of dystopia.
It's too real nowadays. I mean, I read The Strand by Stephen King last year, so that was fun. But like, this idea that actually, like, in 1984, and the government were the bad guys the whole time. Shock horror.
I know, right?
What? Like, imagine a group of people that were working solely in their own interests and just operating and trying to manipulate society for its own gains, which, spoiler alert, were capitalistic. What? We haven't heard that before. June, for example, obviously the movie came out this year. I'm a huge fan of the series. I'll put that out there. But like, the undertones about like capitalism and race and culture that go throughout the entire series, the whole series is, power is bad. That's the big takeaway message, is that power is dangerous. It's often misused and mismanaged, and it just causes everyone a whole lot of bother.
Yep.
So you get these sort of binary things. Dr. Kelly Dunlap, the community manager of Take This, is a fantastic clinical psychologist and game designer. And she's actually delivered several talks on like mental health representation in games. And her sort of one of her favorite examples is Kefka from Final Fantasy VI. And he's crazy. Just wants to destroy everything because he's crazy. And that's the terminology used. It's just sought to explain it and how that's really damaging, right? Because it just says, well, these people would do things. And statistics reinforce that actually, if you're experiencing ill mental health, particularly to like a high severity, like you're more likely to be a victim of crime than you are to perpetuate it.
Yep.
So, and these are statistics, like, that are openly sourced, and again, we can be critical of the statistics generally and say, okay, well, police reports and findings and that sort of thing. But, this is something that's been found in many, many countries across the world, across a long period of time. So we can kind of accept it as much more reliable than other statistics, maybe. And like, it's so often, I mean, try and think of a villain that isn't just crazy. And it's actually quite a challenge, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think, one of my favorite games is Final Fantasy VII. And actually, I think Sephiroth is a good example of like, he's not just crazy. He discovers that he was part of a massive, spoilers for a game that's how many years old at this point? But like,
it came out when I was 15, so that would be 24.
But he was part of a eugenics program, and actually, spoiler alert, but Sephiroth isn't really the villain; it's Hojo, because he's the one that orchestrated these things purely for science, because he wanted to just see what would happen. And like Sephiroth actually just gets a bit mad and, does suffer from the trauma of realizing that he's an experiment. And I'm not saying that that justifies what he does at all, but like actually when you dig real deep into the story, there's actually quite a lot there. Like I think that would be quite traumatic for anyone to just read in a couple of books one day that you're actually formed from a genetic experiment from an alien. That's pretty radical, right? Like I wouldn't take that news well.
No, I don't know. I mean, actually, I'd probably not be surprised at this stage.
Well, I just thought that myself.
It's like that. No, actually, I feel so like finally there's a weight been lifted. All of this stuff makes sense. It's like when my bipolar disorder got labelled. It was I understand everything now. Well, actually, I didn't because I was 14, but yeah. So okay.
The questions that I'm trying to find out, what research like am I? So I really, the base of it is what impact does playing these games have on people? Does it change? Does it impact knowledge? Does it change perception? It's as simple as that, and it sounds very reductive, but that's just because there is very little research. So you kind of have to start very broadly, and then the idea being that throughout the years, my career, other people will pick that up and then continue to develop it. So it sounds very broad, but like the key research question is like, okay, well, what happens when we play these games? Because as you say, anecdotally, there is a good body of evidence. Checkpoint by Joe Donnelly, a fantastic read about video games and mental health. I'd recommend it to anyone and everyone. It's so good. It talks about his personal journey. It talks about the impact that just playing games has helped his mental health, as well as talking about the games that are being very specifically designed to open conversation about mental health, to help people with ill mental health, and it's a very, very bustling field. There's a lot going on. As I say, more and more people are having experiences, being able to understand experiences and articulate those in artistic ways.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really beautiful thing. And that's a thing that I think is really positive. But we need the science, we need to start somewhere.
So going into asking this question, obviously we talk, you're as a scientist, you're supposed to be completely and utterly objective and not have any idea of it. It's kind of a null hypothesis at this point. It's like, what were you expecting to find?
Well, I can't say too much because the study is ongoing. I've only started my studies. I don't want to potentially impact anyone who's listening who could be a participant. But it is just essentially, okay, what will happen? So there is kind of an null hypothesis where I'm not sure what's going to happen. Let's find out.
Yeah.
In my heart of hearts, as you can probably guess through this conversation, I have a bias.
You want it to be positive.
But ultimately, it's like, well, let's find out. We can only do that if we get the data, ask the question, and find out,
Okay. So I guess at this stage, my next question I'll have to avoid it because it was going to be, what have you found so far? But if it would be an ongoing research, you should probably just stay away from that, right?
I can talk a lot about the things that I've read that have helped build into what I'm doing, and sort of just general kind of game research stuff is that, people are brought into a lab and they play games for maybe an hour and then, they do some stuff and then maybe they're brought back. A lot of games are quite long. So getting participants to be able to play them and, understand their play experience is quite difficult. So, and I always joke about this, but a big part of the early part of my writing was spending a lot of time just playing games. A big thing of what I'm trying to do is not compare oranges and bananas, but compare like red and green apples.
Yeah.
It's like they're at least the same fruit. The flavor just might be a bit different.
Yeah.
And it sounds like I was being paid to play games for science purposes, but it was actually really stressful to find like both a game that I could use as part of the study, but then find something that was similar enough to be able to give participants with different themes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was genuinely a challenge, particularly in terms of length. Asking a participant to fill out some surveys and then play a game that's 8 hours long, that's a big ask. It's a big ask for anyone. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't get that many hours in a week to play games, let alone for science. So a lot of effort went into making sure that the methods were logical. There were those ethical safeguards. The reason I'm doing this is because there was this gap in the literature. And that's what kind of led me to it. So what I found so far is that there is this gap. Let's find that out. One of the best studies that I have seen is by Ariane Fouchot et al. I think it was 2019, but it might have been 2020. I probably should have looked it up before I came on. But that looked at stigmatization and characters presenting in mental health. And I actually looked at people that played Hellblade, Senzuna's Sacrifice, and then people that watched that gameplay footage separately afterwards to see if there was a difference in perceptions of people experiencing ill mental health. And there was.
Okay.
And like that, I was like, okay, so this is kind of this is good. This is starting to breach into this area.
Yeah.
What can I do to benefit to this to make it, more accessible to more participants? And I've chosen to zero in on student mental health because, ultimately my work is in a university. I experienced ill mental health as a student myself, so I was very passionate about that. It could have been much more broad, but I think when like working in a university, students are very accessible, generally speaking. Students, and it's kind of a meme. Oh, the study looked at students because they're accessible and easy to get, but like student mental health in of itself is a big problem at the moment, particularly in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's actually like this is a really important group to get in touch with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So basically what you're saying is that from people who've watched, for example, watching the story unfold as a streamer plays the game versus the person who actually played the game themselves, their perceptions of the characters were different within.
Well, in this study, there was a group that played the game and then they filled out the surveys, and then there's a group that watched that gameplay. So it was just a watch or a play kind of breakdown. I'm not doing the paper justice, but I'm pretty sure it's available for free online. And it is very, very accessible.
What was the author on this one? Sorry,
it was Ariane Fouchot et al. I can send you a link to it. But it was a really, really good study. It's one of the best papers I think I've read in a while. But yeah, it just sort of it does stuff in a very sensible way, I guess. It's really not giving it enough credit.
Yeah, well, just the one thing I kind of wanted to zone in on that is because we're now in the advent of streaming, and for the last sort of 5 years or so, since even longer than that, if you go to YouTube's Stampy's Lovely World and all that stuff that my kids were watching forever ago, we actually have more people watching games than probably ever before. So, and I know a lot of streamers do actually favor the more mental health presenting games, or the more pro mental health games. Life is Strange being an example there. And I found it quite interesting because are you familiar with the Black Mirror Bandersnatch episode?
Yes. Yeah.
So I adore Black Mirror. I think it's brilliant. I one day I plan to, even though it's totally going to be irrelevant and out of date by then, I plan to sit down and talk about what the mental health impact of it, what the mental health message is in each episode. And sometimes there's one there, sometimes there isn't. But when Bandersnatch came out, and for anyone who's listening who didn't know that, basically Bandersnatch is choose your own adventure book, the game, so through Netflix you choose what the character does. And I felt I wanted to see all the different endings, but at the same time, sending the character that's on the screen down the wrong path or the darker paths in that thing, I was actually sat there handing the controls to my wife. I'm like, I can't make this decision. And she's like, oh, what are you on about? Just press a button. And I'm like, all right, well, if you think it's so easy, you just press a button then. And she was like, actually, I can't either. And it's when you are, even though all of this has all been filmed, all of the outcomes have all been filmed, I'm not actually doing anything to a real person in this. It felt, there was something different that I've never felt before in my entire life when I was playing that game, watching that show, amalgamation.
This Bandersnatch is a really interesting example because it really blurs the lines of, because it was available on Netflix, which is known as a video platform. I know they're wanting to include games and some stuff. I don't know too much about that. But like, essentially Bandersnatch is an FMV, right? There are several FMV games. I mean, Night Trap was an FMV way back when,
on the Sega Mega CD.
Yeah. So like, FMVs aren't new, but this is arguably because it's Black Mirror, one of the most well done, most absolutely mind-boggling, time-space bending, incredibly smoothly done. Like, it operates very smoothly. There is no huge delay. Decisions happen, and then you can restart very quickly, which I think adds to it. But one of the big things about games and why games are so culturally important, I think, is that it's probably is still debated, but I'd say it's mostly accepted, especially if you talk to anyone who's ever played a game. But playing a game is just more involved than watching a film. Streaming, you mentioned, that's a whole different kettle of fish, and it's a whole different area of research because, as you say, it's so new. Research is always a little bit behind on sort of the cultural norms. But like, streaming adds a whole new dimension to it. Like, what happens when you have that community catharsis of experiencing a game? For Spooky Month, I did a Let's Play of Silent Hill 2, one of my favorite games.
Silent Hill 2.
But I called it Let's Psychology, because I was like, okay, let's break the game down, both in terms of its story, but also like the game design choices. Like, the fog, like, it was done to help the game load, but it's actually brilliant in the way it functions. The radio, like, that goes off, and I started to panic. I
loved it.
And actually, I'll be fair, on the main part, it actually deals with its mental health really well. During the hospital section, that they have patients experiencing mental health, and there's a note from a doctor being like, "I'm not a psychiatrist. I can't help this person. I don't know why they're here." And I was like, "Wow, this is that's really big."
And Silent Hill 2 was what, like 2000, 2001?
Yeah, 2001.
Yeah.
Don't get me, like, the game's not perfect. Like, there's a few scenes, like the boss fight with Angela, that Angela's involved in, like that. Very triggering. There's some the metaphorical stuff there is very, I had to have a little sit down after that one. We had to spend a little bit of time breaking that down. But actually, like, on the main, I felt the game handled stuff really well. Really with quite a good level of sensitivity, and not to mention doing that 20 years ago. And we've had games like Outlast that haven't handled mental health as well and are much more recent. So like, there's that way of being able to analyze things and break stuff down. But for me, and I think there are several that would agree, playing a game is just unique to, I love reading books, I love watching TV, but playing a game is just that next level. The community catharsis, the level of streaming and community interaction, that is different. And that, I think, is a few, there are people researching this now, but getting findings and research papers is a little bit beyond us at the moment. That's also on like the crest of the wave that's happening now, and is a whole new area because, community relation on Twitch. And, I've read a paper on like why people donate on Twitch and things like this. And that research is emerging. It's just not quite there yet, mainly because it's actually really quite hard, like to gather data on that, like trying to go into a streamer and then talking to them and then their community, and not everyone wants to do science. Some people just want to sit and watch Twitch, and like you have to add in factors like, well, what if people are lurking? What if we don't know they're in chat? What if people are watching VODs back? I don't know about yourself, but I mean, you have mentioned it before, but like, most streamers now, they outsource their content to multiple platforms.
Yeah.
What if you're just watching that Let's Psychology on YouTube? So you're watching a streamer and people watch the streamer live, but that happened live, but you're watching the recording and then you're commenting on YouTube and then you watch the next episode. Whoa, big things start to happen there.
Yeah.
We cannot make any inferences as to that impact yet, but that's some big exciting science.
Yeah.
Excellent. So if anyone's looking to do a PhD in psychology, Twitch stuff is definitely there.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the when you've even down to donations, like you said before, it's like I remember like first coming onto this platform and thinking, why would anybody, like, when you can watch for free, like, and I support like, around about 10 channels ish every month now, and I just basically became part of the ecosystem. But the easiest way I described it was playing around for a while was, okay, if there's a busker playing in your town centre, you hear that music whether you tip that person or not. So you're getting the show for free, and but some people choose to tip, and that's essentially kind of. But obviously, there's more to it than on Twitch than that, because you don't just tip, you become part of the community. You get a little badge, you become part of an in-group. You become, it is absolutely a fascinating place for psychology, because anybody outside of it is like, well, you can watch people on YouTube for free. Why would anyone ever sub to somebody? Like, that question comes up more than, like, to people who don't do Twitch, that question comes up to me more than anything else. So yeah, it's I
mean, you say to people like, I stream, and people will be like, what? Like, you're just recording a video? Like, no, I'm live. I'm interacting with people. Yeah. There is a body of research that has looked at like Twitch and social interactions. There's some really good stuff, again, by Dr. Kelly Dunlap on anxiety, and another person whose name I horribly can't remember, but they actually looked at like streamers' mental health and like the impact of being the streamer and working with the community. There's also lots of work that's being done on sort of like parasocial relationships. People like Dr. Emery S. Daniel, he's a very known scholar for sort of parasocial relationships. Like, I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, but like, most of the time you're not friends with your streamer. It's a parasocial relationship, but when you're in front of a camera, you're a different person to when you're not in front of a camera. Most of the time, I don't want to sound too generalized, but it's a performative action to be in front of a camera. I like to think I'm very representative of myself, but I am different. Of course I am. Even in the very simple sense of, if you're streaming, you might articulate more stuff as you're playing a game aloud that would be internal. And a few times I've noticed where I've gone, oh, sorry, I've not said anything for 5 minutes. I've just been thinking about the game.
That's why I don't game on stream. I can't do it. I can't. I'm not an entertaining gamer. And if people want to watch me speedrun, that's cool, but I'm not going to talk to them through it because but yeah, I can't.
So there's a lot of like great stuff being done in that area as well. And then also on top of that, to get a bit more meta, talking about mental health, it's something I do on my channel, but you have to be really, really explicit and be like, I'm not a qualified mental health professional. It would be unethical to give mental health advice, particularly clinical advice, on stream. I can always anecdotally say, I'm here to listen. I'm here to support you in that way. I'm here to, this is a space you can talk about stuff. I will always wax lyrically say, well, this is what I did. These are things that I found to be helpful to me, but I can't prescribe those to you.
Yeah.
And, even if like in a few years' time, willing, I will be a doctor of psychology. I will be a doctor, but I still wouldn't give advice out on Discord or on Twitch, because that's just unprofessional. You can't. It's not the same. Yeah. You have to go and seek that out in a very specific way. The backlash of that is, I think, more people are seeking and engaging with that type of thing, because unfortunately people are doing it because the access to mental health services are so bad in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need the support.
Yeah, and this is something I was explaining to people on stream. I imagine as a scientist, you've come across the Dunning-Kruger effect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we were explaining that on stream last week about why, and I was saying why I don't trust experts, because basically most people aren't actually experts. Most people are in that low knowledge but high confidence zone where basically they know a little bit, but they've got the confidence to tell you all of it as if this is the fact, And I said, look, if you listen to kind of some of the more educated or the more qualified guests that I have on the show, they will say things like studies show that, this is the latest research suggests that. They won't say you should do this, definitely 100%. And unfortunately, there's a weird bit of psychology there that when people hear studies show that, they feel that's a flaky answer. And when they hear, you should definitely do this, you should definitely walk around with your dog on your shoulder, it'll fix your bad back. It's like, I did it and it fixed my bad back in 2 days. And when people will be like, yeah, like I'm going to do that as well. And again, it's only, a subset of people. It's not everybody, but a lot of people like to hear that I can definitely do this. Versus actually the studies currently show this. Based on the current research that, my degree was in nutrition, and I my confidence in nutrition now, I used to be like one of those, these diets work, that works, that, this is like, I was much more happy to present on nutrition before than I am now. Because ultimately it's like, well, actually, this might, especially to a group, this to an individual, much easier, but to a group, it's like, well, this might work for some of you and it might not work for some, other people. And like, imagine a TV ad saying, our cars work for 80% of people. Like, we want to hear this definite thing, but generally speaking, you're actually not going to hear definite from an expert unless they've got a chance to sit down with you one-to-one, really get to know you and your story, especially when it comes to mental health. It's like there's no fix, there's no one size fits all. We have, as we expected, gone off in a completely different direction away from games for ages here. And I'm going to like not even remotely gently bring us back to it. What are some of the actual negatives that have been observed in the impact between the impact of the negative impact of games on mental health? Has there been any negative? We're going to go into the positive as well. Don't worry. I'm not like biasing it towards negative because I'm a gamer.
I mean, honestly, like I haven't. There's always research that sort of says like, yes, this is negative and things like this. But again, as I mentioned before, the scrutiny of the research, the deeper you kind of look into it, the more questionable you can kind of say, well, actually, did they kind of fudge the numbers, or the sample size, the number of participants they had was very small. You mentioned there about like, the difference between speaking to an expert or not. The only thing guaranteed in science is that you will be wrong. That's how you know someone's a scientist, because you're like, actually 95% of the time I'm probably going to be wrong.
Yeah.
And if I think I'm right, I'm also probably wrong, because in 20 years time someone will probably look at my studying on this was absolute dross. This lad had no idea what he was on about. The science we have now is so much better. And that's the catalyst for science, right? Wanting to prove quote unquote that something is there. The big most scientific discoveries that we've had throughout the years, have been from people going, I'm not sure about this, I want to find out. And then getting a breakthrough, and then several years later being proved differently or indeed supported. But if you just go in with the fact of like, well, I don't know, I'm likely to be wrong, then, okay, let's go into it. Now, from this kind of, I'd call it morning TV kind of perspective of science, like, a study, singular, has shown, not the latest research or several studies, because that's, a big distinction. People always say things like, oh, screen time is terrible, it's bad for well-being, mental health, it's affected its own, social media. Think of the children is the common one, so that's the kind of rallying cry that people can get behind. So you do, there are sadly lots of books and media and articles saying, my child played this and now smashes cars with a cricket bat.
Yeah.
Like, of course, the people are going to imply negatives and assert the correlation and the causation. Even in my own experience, it's like, oh, well, is this game too violent to let little Chris play, as a boy? And it's like, I was allowed to play a lot of what I wanted to when I was a child, because I was very easily able to say, well, no, I understand that this is in the game and in the confines of that virtual world, and it's not going to affect my behavior in the external world. There are laws largely for a reason. I mean, tell that to the government who blatantly ignore them, but whatever. Sorry, political.
Everything's political.
but like, there are always going to be people that exist outside systems, but generally speaking, social contracts exist because we need each other. I can't drive. I'm visually impaired. I need bus drivers. I'm relying on people that drive public transport. So if they just woke up one day and donned tools and went, nah, I'm all right, I'm not going to drive any public transport anymore, that'd be me stuffed. I couldn't drive anywhere. Again, I think quite neatly emphasized by things like the pandemic, but like key workers, the incredible efforts that are put in. Like, I've worked in retail. It's not easy. I have great sympathy for, sympathy is probably the wrong word, great gratitude for what people have had to go through over the past sort of, 18 months, 2 years nearly.
Yeah.
Like it's that whole, like, always try and tip your servers personally, especially if you've had good service, because they're probably working for like a very, a lower than living wage, that sort of thing. but to circle that back around, like, people are always going to say negative things about stuff because it's that moral panic. It sells, unfortunately. You will have an quote unquote expert sit on a couch with a nice morning TV presenter and say, well, you should hear about this case of little Tommy who at 12 years old, played Grand Theft Auto. Next thing you know, he's stealing cars, he's, doing drugs and all these sorts of things, and it's like, okay, but that's a singular sample. Obviously not great for little Tommy, and I'm sure Tommy would need some intervention in that instance. More so, why did you not provide the intervention instead of writing about it? But different question. But it's not representative of everyone. Again, chocolate. I've got a real sweet tooth. Is my use of chocolate problematic? Am I addicted to chocolate? Well, it hasn't at the moment affected any other area of my experience or life at the moment. I'm not stopping turning up to things like this because I'm eating chocolate. It hasn't affected my physical health. I think the problem is that because we publicly are only just now learning and accepting a lot more about mental health, that it's very easy to talk about and say, well, it's affecting insert, and people kind of not maybe understand that or have the confidence in challenging that, so it just becomes accepted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. At the same time, it's like, okay, it's like, you said that everyone wants to make the link between little Timmy and about or little Tommy and he played GTA. It's like, well, okay, cool. I've played every GTA except for Vice City. That means I'll lose about 10% of my audience now, who all love Vice. Apparently so. I just missed that one because I thought it was like, it's not a full game because I'd played GTA 3 on the PS2 and then I waited until GTA 4, which actually I liked GTA 4 because I love Russian accents, but I loved playing as Nico Bellic. It was great. But basically, so I've played every GTA since except for Vice City, and I run a mental health peer support network. It's like, so maybe playing GTA, maybe Vice City is the one that makes you go out and smash up cars. I don't know. It's like, it's funny how like we do make these kind of connections when it's like, okay, as you said before, like causation doesn't equal like correlation doesn't equal causation. It's like there's a great set of books by a bunch of guys called the Freakonomists. Like, have you ever heard of Freakonomics? Like, basically they talk about things from an economist point of view, and they connect things that like they show weird connections that are out there, and they show like I think one of them they were talking about was like how I think it was swimming pools should be outlawed more than guns in America because everyone talks about gun violence, which obviously is a huge deal. But actually, like more people actually, I think it was either that way around or the other way around, that people were like petitioning for this. Or the big one, I suppose, over there is the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge has been a very large site of suicide for over the years. And it's never really been the site of any bike accidents, but someone asked for a bike lane on it and one got put up, whereas people were petitioning for years to have a net placed around it. And even though there were, incidents happening there for that, like it took forever to get this net put up. I think it's Malcolm Gladwell actually talks about that at the end of Outliers. No, not Outliers, Tipping Point maybe. And yeah, it's bizarre how like, okay, we've got to have a cycle lane in here because of this, whereas actually this is a much bigger problem. So why aren't we doing anything about that?
It's what we would call in psychology like a schema, or like it sort of bundles in sort of like a prejudice or a stereotype, but like it's kind of colloquially understood on like almost like and it's kind of it's taught to people, which is how it becomes sort of common knowledge. But like, cyclists need protection from cars. Being a cyclist on the road is dangerous. Have your high vis on, wear your helmet. You're at risk. Kind of thing. So that's why, of course, as soon as someone went, you want cycling? Yeah, boss, you got it. Because that's easy to deal with and we kind of understand and we can kind of very easily justify that. But a net round the Golden Gate Bridge, how would we justify that? I mean, it's not going to look as nice on the postcards then. We can't ship this on social media. So and again, it's stigmatization plays a role, I think, understanding. And I don't like to use the word in a overly zealous fashion, but like ignorance. People who don't bother to go and like learn about something or understand it. So it's much easier to just plonk it aside. A schema is, is that kind of thing where we like to see things in a binary array, right? We don't want that cognitive dissonance. Classic example is like, you might not think too hard about what you have for lunch, but like you might think really hard about like what house you're going to buy or who you're going to marry. And like generally people don't like that. Making big important decisions is quite difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You think about stuff, you're evaluating several lists and stats, and Malcolm Gladwell, again, I'm a big fan, so I apologize about the many references, but Blink like talks about this a lot, like overthinking can actually lead to worse outcomes than just making a decision. Which is a big school of thought itself. I'm not au fait with the research in that area, but like, we don't like thinking about things as a species. It takes far too much resource. So we like to just put things in a box, very binary. There's a joke that like they say, computers are made in like the image of the human brain, and that's why it's in binary code, because our brains would love to function on just ones and zeros and not have to worry about anything else. Our brains would be so happy if things were just 1 or 0.
Maybe I can't work in absolutes. They do my head in. What was I going to say then? It's completely gone. What games that from your experience are positive examples of mental health, whether that is positive for the player or whether that is positive representations of mental health in the game itself?
Okay, well, I'll do both. I think the uptake in cozy games like Animal Crossing, again, there was actually that positive finding of well-being in Animal Crossing play. I'm a fan of the series. I've played it since the GameCube version. That's helped a lot of people. We were all locked in our homes, and then suddenly we could go to this beautiful tropical isle with our animal friends and terraform it into the beautiful world we wanted to. Mine is called Misty Isle, after I'm a huge fan of musical artist Father John Misty. I just enjoyed being there. It was a great place and making things my own. It was beautiful. Yeah. Games like that, I think they're helpful. I think the side to that is, you mentioned the game for the time. Sometimes I'll be there like, I really just fancy causing some havoc. Let's jump on a game that's destructive, and that'll bring me a great sense of pleasure.
Red Faction Guerrilla. No, that was this game flew under most people's radars, but you could the whole point of that game was to destroy everything. Like if you had to destroy a base, it wasn't just get rid of the people in the base. It was like literally destroy all the structures and everything. It was brilliant.
Other people, like Euro Truck Simulator, you just drive from point A to B, and that's some people's job. Be a truck driver.
Yeah, I always loved that, like with the way where like it's like let's play a simulator of something that you wouldn't do in real life. Like my wife walked in and me playing Unpacking last week, and she's like, "Why is that game tidier than your offices?" I'm like, "Because I don't have to tidy this desk to finish the level." But yeah, like playing games, like for example, Minecraft. It's Minecraft was a prime example of where I could literally lose hours of my life in this super chilled out way. Like I watched my kids playing it, and I'm like, this all pixely stuff. Why does the graphics look like this? This is like what the first Doom looked like. And then I sit down and play it, and then it's like, 4 hours later. it's like I'm totally and utterly zen. I was playing on creative mode, but like
in that, like, so the broad answer to that question is that like it's actually just what you enjoy. Like most recently I've been playing, after seeing a pack of cards in a shop, I just had the urge to play a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like many people, I did as a boy, and love a good trading card game. So I bought one of the most recent iterations of the digital game that doesn't have any pay to win. There are no in-game transactions. There isn't just in-game digital currency. Where am I playing? Beautiful. Excellent praise for that. And I'm just playing through the first story, the story that I understand and know, and I'm enjoying it immensely. And it's just, I might win, I might lose, but it just brings me joy. So I think in that regard, it's about what you enjoy. Yeah. I know people that I love JRPGs, these huge, massive 100-hour quests. Oh, don't you believe it? Don't doubt for a single second. I don't take an immense amount of joy from gaining a level and getting like those +1s and +2s, getting that new piece of armor. I'm feeling like, oh yeah, that boss has got it coming. I love that. That's what makes me happy. Now, representations. Now, prepare for an opinion. I will die on this hill.
I'll get comfy.
I have said this several times, and I will continue to say it. Celeste is the best game ever. Period. Fight me. It has the main character.
I've played it more than any other game this year, but
the main character, representation-wise, is a trans person. Excellent. That's been formed by the designer's experience, which is wonderful. It has a good representation of cast in terms of ethnicity, age, diversity. That isn't forced. It's not just tokenism. It's there. Every song on the soundtrack is an absolute banger. I own B-sides on vinyl. It's that good. Farewell was added as DLC and could have been an entire second game for free. The mental health representation is just so good. You could totally miss it if you don't watch any of the cutscenes, but even the personal strife of just climbing that mountain, I feel, is an ethereal experience for anyone. It has brilliant accessibility options. You can change the speed, the modes. Not to open up another debate, but this whole you have to play on hard to be a game player. Crap. Let's put that to one side. But anyone can play Celeste at any skill level and enjoy it and go through that journey. Now, being critical, you could say, okay, a content warning would have been great. I personally say that it deals with the mental health themes in such an excellent and sensitive way that I don't think it's necessarily triggering, personally. That's my opinion, my view. I think all games should have better content warnings. Again, separate debate. But for me, I hadn't played platformers that much. I loved them as a child and just sort of grew out with them a little bit. But this just was amazing. 70 hours I've put into it. And I just think it's the perfect game. It just has everything. It has a beautifully emotional point. It's about mental health. It has genuine, diverse representation. And it's just good. It's good fun. There's so many layers to it.
And the technique that Theo teaches Madeline about the breathing feather is legit and actually works.
Yeah.
And it's great. No, I absolutely love Celeste. The problem is I tend super competitive with it and speedrun it. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. And the story, because obviously when you speedrun it, you don't get any of the story and stuff. But the whole concept of trying to escape your mental health and then learning to work with it. That's full on spoilers, but hey ho. Everyone on my streams seen me play through the game a bunch of times.
And that's the thing, that you could just play it and you're like, oh, there's this battling creature and what's going on here, and laser beams, and whoa, this is dank. And even from I got into it from watching someone speedrun it and was like, whoa, this game just looks really fun. And then I played it and just fell in love because it's so brilliant. And I think for me, it's the best. It's the top.
Yeah. I've done that one. I was open to give me another one because I want one to me to find now. Completely, utterly selfish reasons. And don't say Greece because I've already done that one as well.
There are. I've actually got a folder in my Steam library that is for mental health. So I have it for research, but I haven't got around to playing many of them.
Okay.
There are games like Fractured Minds. That was actually an award-winning game with Safe in Our World. So there are games out there. I haven't been able to play as many of them as I would like.
Have you come across Superliminal yet?
I've heard of it, but I haven't played it.
I thought it was good. It's also the doctor in it who's he's got the most soothing Scottish accent ever. But yeah, I won't do spoilers on that, even though we played through the entire thing in one stream last week. It's the outcome of it, I think, is very, very good, and it's a great game for kind of teaching you to look at things differently.
And I think we touched on it before, but Hellblade as well, just because they went through that incredible process of speaking to people with lived experience, and they consulted medical professionals to make sure it was spot on. Psychonauts 2 actually has a content warning by Dr. Raphael Bocanozo, or Dr. B from Take This, and it sort of openly says it might deal with mental health in a comical way, but it's just designed to help provide levity in a very serious situation and promote discussion.
Yeah.
And I haven't played Psychonauts 2 yet because I was I'll replay the first one before I play the second one, and just haven't finished that replay yet. Because time doesn't exist. But there's definitely these games are there and they're beginning to heighten in popularity, and that's again where my research feeds in.
Yeah.
My ideal research project would be to get people to play Celeste and actually just chart that over a year or so and just, like if I had infinite resources, that I'd love to do that, but sadly not very feasible for a PhD.
Amazing. What other questions would you like to see people asking and researching in this field?
I just think it is about like effects. I think it really is just like, okay, well, what's the impact of this? We talked about Twitch research. I think that'd be a great avenue for research. I think it would let us learn a lot about, like, particularly digital subcultures and the people that kind of live online. Like, there's always been that joke of, like, the people that are online are, they're the people that you don't see on the street. This kind of like cartoony image, but like more and more people are spending time online than ever. Like, we're all so connected now. Even this interview is being facilitated by the internet, So there are these things that are like, happening. I would love to see some research. Maybe it exists. I haven't actually looked for it, but I'd love to sort of look at different experiences between playing like solo, cooperative, and competitive in like the same game. I think that would be really interesting to look at like individual differences and like co-op play. And so that would just be of interest to me as someone that likes a lot of single player adventures, but also loves co-op.
Yeah, definitely. As I said, like playing solo, playing versus the computer or versus people, for me is a very, very different experience. I've never really, and the only thing with co-op really, I think I ever really did was Crackdown 2. And on the day that Crackdown 2 came out, me and my friend Stu both got it. We'd gone on holiday together, and we both got back, and we had another full day before we were both back in work. So we bought this game and we played it in one sitting, and it's still one of the kind of greatest memories of my entire life. But yeah, playing with somebody else. I mean, it's like I've still, anyone in chat that wants to help me with this one. I've still not got anyone to play It Takes Two with, but it's like I want to play it. Apparently, it's the greatest co-op game of all time, and so I'd be interested in sort of seeing that too in terms of what people's experiences were there, because literally I've got my own experience to go off, and that's about it really.
I am very sorry. I just need to step away for a quick minute.
Okay.
Editing, but I'll be back in just one tick.
It's fine. I need a wee anyway, so that's going to work out perfectly. Everybody, we'll be back in a minute.
Toilet break.
Right, chat. I will be coming to questions from chat now, like basically when Chris gets back. So I see there's a few in there already, but if you've got a question that you want answering, please do pop it in for me. Let's have a little look. Dave gone wee wee. I'll need to edit. I need to cut bits out. I actually need to edit. Oh. I'm sure I saw a few up there. I'm looking for ones that if by the way, if you did ask a question but you didn't tag me, if you wouldn't mind please retyping it and just tag me in it. Otherwise it's trying to find them in the mix. What do we say? My son put me on Twitch as he felt my context and others would be welcomed on Twitch, as it's a good platform, but not just for gamers, and it's great to see this happening. It's actually a good question. Which games qualify as good, beneficial games, and which ones don't? How do we define that? Yeah, is it a generational thing? So I think that I'll ask that question. I think did that come up further up, Raven? I'll ask that question when Chris gets back. But I think it's similar to what we just said. Then it's if a game's good for you, it's good for you.
Hello, sorry.
It's okay, no problem. So actually, I'll just read this. I'll read this comment actually, because there's a couple. I was just looking in and catching up with what questions are coming from chat. And I think Raven's comment answers the question that's slightly further down. So it says, I think gaming has an immediate good effect if it makes you feel good and excited to go on. However, after years of being a gamer, I feel that maybe I've become less good at not being permanently distracted by something. It's a feeling that seems to be very personal, maybe. However, could it be that if empty space of life is filled in with games, which are very immersive and distracting, like nothing else games drag you in, you reflect and process mentally less efficiently? I think that's a very good question. I think, I've thought about this for ages, and I actually was going to make an episode of the podcast at one point called "The Problem with Attractiveness," which is a very clickbaity title, because you have to be if you want people to listen. It's sad, but ultimately I don't think games are necessarily the problem, or like I think that we go for whatever is the most attractive to us. So a game is an attractive way of spending your time. It's an enjoyable way of spending your time. Like we said at the very beginning of the interview, it's a very enjoyable way of spending your time. So as a result, we deal with everything by comparison. So if you've never played games and never saw how amazing they are, then you're probably not going to be as drawn to them away from other things that are less attractive. But actually, once you've spent time playing something that you really enjoy, now it's like, well, why would you want to? Why would anybody want to do things that they don't enjoy? And it's like...
If I were to give a counter to that, I would say, and I'll use another idiom, but like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, I up until this year, I never understood the appeal of tabletop RPGs, but I played D&D for the first time this year, and I absolutely love it. Full on hooked, love playing it. But I just, it's that Bob Dylan lyric, like, don't criticize what you don't understand.
Yeah.
So, if you can sort of remove yourself and say, actually, I do not know enough about this to be able to give an opinion. Particularly like because we love opinions, right?
Oh yeah.
There are a couple of other factors, and like people talk about like it feeds back to screen time, but like attention. People say like things like TikTok are so popularized because they're so short, and they give us that instant gratification and that dopamine hit. I actually someone shared an article about like I forget the exact quote, but it's like I'm seeing young people in their 20s who are otherwise perfectly healthy have their lives ruined by video games because the dopamine high, they just can't get it anywhere else. And I was like, okay, credit for like the absolute lean into the argument, but scientifically kind of debatable. Actually, I'd even go as far as say false. Because you talk about, because people love talking about brain chemicals, like they're a neuroscientist, and a few people are, but like spoiler alert, everything gives your brain dopamine. If you enjoy it, your brain is like, I enjoy this, which is why, I can't resist a pudding after a nice meal. I might not even be like, I might be like a little bit full, but I'm like, I've got room for cake. I can open up my dessert stomach because I don't want that. I want that little bit of chocolate. So, it's, people like to talk about things like instant gratification and things like that. But actually, like, people have been doing what they want to for pleasure throughout the entire of history. It's just that what we've been doing has changed a lot. And a lot more accessible, I think, because these things are at our homes, they're in our pockets, they're in our hands. So it just gets that, it just feeds into that moral panic, that negative attributed to attributed to that negatively. But it's like, anything in excess is probably not ideal. And like, you might do a thing. I don't know about yourself, but like I have like a cycle of like hobbies where I'll play like maybe like a certain platform for a long time, or I'll go through a period where I'm playing loads of games, but then I'll spend a couple of months just reading loads of books and not playing games as much. I also play guitar because, of course, I present as a white guy and I have a beard, so of course I play acoustic guitar, right? I say I present as a white guy because I'm a person with albinism, so I always say it's slightly different, separate argument. But like, But like I'll have times where I just play guitar loads, and that becomes my primary hobby. It doesn't mean I don't enjoy games less or enjoy reading any less. It's just what I fancy doing. I kind of playfully describe it as like, whatever you get a bit of a lust for.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just really want to like play a certain type of game or do a certain type of activity.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay to do what you kind of want to do, presuming that you're not hurting anyone else or yourself, and it's completely safe.
Yeah.
Like giving yourself a little bit of what you want.
This is the thing: is it has to be down to the individual to like. Okay, I know this is going into like the mental health questionnaires that you get in the doctors, which are pretty outdated and need a bit of an update. But it's how much does this impact the quality of your life? Like, and for me, video games, it's like, okay, if at certain points in my life they impact my ability or my desire to do my work sometimes, but actually usually beating myself up about that actually just makes me want to do them more anyway, and makes me want to escape from the fact that I'm beating myself up about the fact that I'm playing too many video games. So it ends up being this big weird cycle.
No, I would say that isn't actually even a video game thing. That's just procrastination.
Well, I'm trying, and recently for me, because I'm in the process of being assessed for ADHD, so it's trying to figure out what's procrastination and what's executive dysfunction, because I never even knew about the term until a couple of years ago, and ultimately it's the biggest thing I've found in the last 12 months for me is, since I've been like even considering that it could be anything other than procrastination, is I just let myself off the hook when the work ain't coming, when it's not like when what I'm trying to do, when I'm pushing and it's just not coming. Instead of sitting there and going, oh, you just need to get your brain working, you just need to do this, I just let myself off the hook, and actually it ends up actually there's less resistance there. It's less time before I actually feel ready to go again, and bigger picture, I'm probably going to do more. It's just, thankfully, I'm self-employed, so I'm not expected, I'm not expected to produce on the 9-to-5 schedule like I used to be.
Well, it's funny you highlight that, because I'm this is opinion. I have no evidence to kind of back this up. This is my thoughts. But like, there's a big argument that actually, particularly in academia doing a PhD, one of the biggest pieces of advice you'll get is work when you work best.
100%.
And it's like, so I'll have days where I can sit and be looking at notes and stuff and just do no work. And then I'll have a day where I just smash it out. And I think it's kind of having that internalization of saying, actually, do you know what? Today is just not a writing day. Today is a day to just, let's go and play one of these games that I've had in my pile for ages, whether that's for fun, whether that's for research, and if I can sort of say, okay, actually, this is still helping the work, so it's not a waste of time, is a big distinction. Sometimes, like, I might have, don't tell my supervisors this, but I might have the odd weekday off because I ended up working on a Sunday, because on that Sunday I was ready to work. Yeah. The problem we have is that and again, I'm, Dave, like yourself, I'm from Liverpool, so you can probably guess my sort of political leaning somewhat, but, because of this kind of capitalist ideology that we have, it's like, well, you should work between these hours, this many days a week, because this facilitates this amount of money, and that's not actually the most healthy thing for people.
Yeah. Well, it was years ago that it's like, it's like how many, there's a very big difference between how many hours you're at work and how many hours you're working. And that's like, I got criticized when I was in an office job years ago. Like I was in an office job until I was about 22. So 17 years ago was the last time I had to work in an office 9 to 5, and I was a computer programmer. And I again, this history of me working like this has been there forever. I'd get all of my stuff done in this great big burst, and then I'd have nothing to do. And the supervisor to see that and think, he's not doing anything. I'm like, I'm doing everything you're giving me. It's like, my boss at the time, because one of the directors kept on coming in and seeing me kind of twiddling my thumbs. He's like, can you just take your time with like the work I've given you? He's like, just take your time with it and do it over the course of the rest of the day, like most people do. And I was just like, well, I hate doing that. I just didn't like. I hated doing that, and because that wasn't my flow, that wasn't my pace. And this is the whole thing, is that we all need to, like the question that was coming up in a sec is about like, what is such a thing as a good game? I think it's like, it depends on what's a good game for you. Like if playing Animal Crossing, you sit there and think, actually, this is boring, and I'm angered by how bored I am at playing this game, then that's like, it's the same as that having a bath is like a terrible thing for some people, and it's the best thing in the world for other people. There's no one size fits all. It's about your rhythm. It's about what works in conjunction with you. And again, when we're talking about mental health, that's no more true, because let's face it, if it was like diabetes medicine or something, it's not like, okay, which one do you think's working? It's actually, no, we really want to know which one's managing your insulin properly here. If it's blood pressure medicine, it's like, okay, I feel like my blood pressure's lower, but you check it and actually it's through the roof. But with mental health, it is how you feel. How you feel is the mental health. Okay, with things like schizophrenia, the amount of kind of hallucinations and stuff you're happening, that's not what you feel. That is what's actually happening, but really with things like depression, with things like anxiety, if you feel less anxious, you are less anxious. If you feel less depressed, you are less depressed.
And I think going back to that work sort of example there that you provided, like the problem is there that if you were a manager and you saw someone either bursting through their work or not doing anything, the traditional cycle would be, well, I'll give you more work. Then.
Yeah.
You clearly want some more to do. And then that is just not going to benefit anyone's mental health.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you get into this vicious capitalist cycle of, well, okay, well, you're very good at what you do, so we'll give you more of it. So you do more, so you feel obliged to do more, and that takes more out of you. Whereas like you might work in those bursts, and that's just fine for you. As long as you're getting done what you're getting done, nothing else should matter, in my view. And again, you touch on some really, really good examples there, and that like, just because of how we sort of understand mental health, like, you can go back as far as René Descartes, I think, therefore I am, was kind of the very first instance that we have in psychology of like actually connecting the mind and body. They're not two separate articles. One informs the other. And it's cyclical. Like, it's cyclical. If you're having like a low mental health day, your body will be less inclined to, function at its highest level, that's something maybe more from experience than opinion. Again, please do separate when I'm talking about research and just my views, like for credibility purposes. But those things are cyclical, right? And sometimes, like, I like to run. Sometimes my body is just like, nah, bit of fatigue. I can't do it today, boss. Even though my brain is ready to run, and you kind of have to learn to listen to yourself in that way. Even with like, ill mental health conditions, like in the DSM-5, there's a cocktail list of, I think it's like nearly 60 things.
It's 84, I think, actually. I counted it once.
that can contribute to depression alone. And it's like, well, I mean, how many do you need to have, right? And I think that's where almost one of the problems is that because mental health and ill mental health specifically can be so individualized, that's why it's quite hard to talk about. And it's only like by saying, well, actually, this is really individual that we need to talk about it more.
Yeah.
So, there are big things to sort of there. And the other side of that, as you mentioned, like the bath is a typical example. I love having a bath. Love it. Love having baths. It's one of my favorite things. I treat myself to a bath every week. I apologize for the image. It's just gone into everyone's minds. But it's just something that's nice for me. No notifications. I usually watch a program, something like an episode of The Joy of Painting. A nice little hour to myself. Nice little beverage of choice. And that helps me. Might not help other people. You get... And this is to coin a phrase from Dr. Kelly Dunlap. You can tell I really love like a certain group of scholars, right? But like there's moral entrepreneurism. So people will look at whatever's hot and whatever is sort of in the social cultural kind of nexus and seek to make money out of it, and that's why you get this kind of like, oh, this new scented bath bomb that has shown to cure anxiety, because they always use terms that are incorrect and vastly.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
That type of thing. It's just not there, but it sells because unfortunately people don't feel that they can discuss these things openly or access information, resources, or support easily enough that we end up seeing people buy into those things. That's not that person's fault. Like if you see a product that's like, I can solve this, like you can't be blamed for going, well, maybe it does.
Yeah. And
even then that pitch is different for everyone else. What makes a good game? I think you can draw the line, if I'm being cynical, at games that don't work, at games that are actually broken.
Yeah.
Looking at you, insert game company name. I won't name them. But, like this kind of thing that happens quite now is that like a thing will maybe stay in early access for several years and it's just unfinished.
Yeah.
And like it, at what point do you say a game just physically is not working as intended? Like you wouldn't take a car that had half an engine, or we just haven't finished building it. Maybe you can take it off the lot now if you want. Again, bigger debate, bigger consumerism kind of thing. Like, I've backed many things on like Kickstarter, for example, and they're products that don't exist yet. I'm buying something that doesn't exist. There are people that really dislike that as a model. But like, this whole thing of like, if a game doesn't work properly, if it's physically broken, and not in a fun way, because Final Fantasy VII is a broken game, but it's fun. Like held together by duct tape, but it's fun. But if a game just physically like doesn't work, then that I think is where you draw the line and say, actually, there's a problem here. But otherwise, as you say, it's opinion. Like if you enjoy something, you enjoy something. That's why games like Power Wash Simulator exist. And I say, I know loads of people that don't enjoy Animal Crossings. A big one was Cozy Grove, where it like, I think, was it Cozy Grove? Where it like limited the amount of things you could do in one session. And loads of people loved that. I'm like, oh, it's great since I don't play too much and it's great for bite-sized chunks. There are other people I knew that like, I get an hour to sit and play, so I want to play for that whole hour and it annoys me I can't play this game for an hour.
Yeah.
Because that's all I got. And because of my focus and my ability to focus on things like and play games, I can't actually get the most out of this game.
Yeah, I think where you are in your life as well can massively dictate it, because I really can't get into overly complicated games now, and I used to love JRPGs as well. Like a big design feature that I just cannot agree with, and this really ruined Breath of the Wild for me, is breakable gear. Like I hate it in every game, but then they bring it into Zelda and it just felt like, no, what are you doing, Nintendo? Like the stress of I found a really good weapon here and I kind of don't want to use it because I don't want it to break. I've got no time for that in a video game, mate. It's like let's remove that feature altogether. Which is actually I think the people at Genshin Impact will probably knew that, because like the first thing that came up when the advert for Genshin Impact came on my phone was no breakable gear, and I'm like, wow, it looks like Breath of the Wild and it's got no breakable gear. It's exactly what I've been looking for.
I'll be really honest, and people will probably turn off at this point because I'm about to lose a lot of credibility, but I really dislike sandbox games, including GTA. Because I don't have a lot of time to invest in them. I love Breath of the Wild, but I've hardly scratched the surface of it because I haven't got the time to sit and get lost in the huge size of the world. So then, or maybe I want to play something else. Maybe I just fancy taking my team through Master League again for another season. And I'll pick it back up and I'll go, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I was doing. I don't know how things work. I've got this great piece of equipment, but I don't know where I'd get it again if it broke. I'm feeling really overwhelmed and getting that sense of like, I just can't get back into this. And that really being a barrier to entry. Which is why
if you're lucky enough to get 2 hours to play on a game, and then like I had this with The Witcher 3 when that was one of the games I played at the beginning of streaming, and I'd spend 2 hours, because I only streamed for 2 hours on a Sunday night when I first started, and it was all games, and it's a very different world now. But I'd basically play The Witcher 3 for 2 hours then, and I wouldn't play it again until I was picking up on stream. That was what I started streaming for. I started streaming for like similar, almost the same as what you said before, as a way to legitimize me playing games, because I can stream and we can have some mental health chat whilst we're here, and then that's like me doing my job, which turns out that I actually don't enjoy games as much when I'm streaming them unless I know it intimately, and then I can free up that part of my mind as that doesn't need to learn the game. But I go back a week later and I'm like, the first 30 minutes of that hour, that's the first hour. It's like, what was I doing? What's the controls again? And then I'd be losing fights, and I'm like, because what was the one to switch my marks and all the rest of that? It's like I couldn't remember all the controls, and it just became a stressful experience, which it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be, well, it depends what you play games for, really. As you said before, we sort of briefly glanced over the gatekeeping thing of like, you're only a real gamer if you X, Y, or Z. My theories on this is you're only a real gamer if you play games.
I mean, even like gamer is a social construct. Like so let me absolutely make everyone spill the tea, right? I wouldn't say I'm a gamer because of the negative connotations associated to that label. It's a social construct. I'm a person that plays games, but spoiler alert, so are like several other billion people, because a lot of people play games, and that includes games on mobile phones. That includes games on handhelds, the Nintendo Switch, PCs, whatever it is. Don't care if you're playing a game, and we could talk about what is a game. That's a genuine debate, and that's a debate I think that will never stop happening. But you can debate what a game is, but I mean, everyone is playing a game of some sort. Even if it's like something even like not like even digital, like board games are games. So
Yeah.
I'm someone that plays games, but I wouldn't call myself a gamer because it's so loaded in a gatekeep kind of, you are this only if you're an XYZ. Like people love to, again, it goes back to binary and schemas and putting people in boxes. Like people would always go like, oh, well, like what type of kid were you in school? And it's kind of very easy to default like, oh, a nerd. But like, I like video games, I like running, I like football. So I don't fit into a stereotype. Therefore, I'm difficult to process. So we'll put Chris in his own little box. And I was asked this the other day actually, and I just said like, I've just always been Chris. I don't fit into a stereotype, so I'm just Chris. I'm a Chris.
Yeah,
I've been that Chris kid for life.
And I think on some level, everyone is like no one 100% fits just one stereotype.
Or some if they do it, it's almost on purpose. And,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. So there's a question. It's kind of hidden in here. It said something about the real games were in relation to that any virtual game isn't real, and that games played outside, like soccer, we're British here, so football, or playing in the garden are real ones. And I feel like there was a question related to that, and I'm struggling to find it, which is annoying. If that question, because I think it was Happy Medium that actually put the original question in and Ravens referenced it. If you could rewrite that question for me at the bottom, I'd be interested to know, because Happy Medium rewrote a question as what games would you recommend that help our mental health then? And obviously we've already answered that side of the question. But like, again, that's like the idea of real games and video games not being real games. It's I do a bit of teaching. I mentioned I actually did optical illusions last week. So I talked to my class about like perception and how like reality is completely individual. We don't live in the same reality because your brain produces your own perception of your own reality. So what is a real game for me might not be a real game for you because reality is individualized. We all kind of try and make sense of it. Like all we're doing really, our brains just, I know it's very almost like meta. It's a bit of a cheeky answer, but like our brains interpret stimuli and then try and make sense of the world. And that's how we exist within it. We kind of by consensus go, oh yeah, this, but I mean, take color blindness, for example. For someone who's colorblind, the sky isn't blue. That melts a lot of people's minds a little bit because like, but the sky, can you not tell them it's blue? And I'm like, okay, well, describe to me a color. Yeah.
I remember in English very vividly, like reading a piece of fiction. It was about a small boy who found a new color, and it was in a ball that he dug up in his garden, and like trying to explain, I found a new color. And I'm like, well, what is it? And he's like, well, I don't know, because it's new. And does that kind of mean that, how do they make new paint colors? You have people sat around a board table going, well, it's like a crushed raspberry on a crisp autumn night in, November, when there's smoke in the air. So we should call it smoked raspberry. And that's how they make like new,
smoked autumn raspberry.
Autumn raspberry.
Yes.
The new paint range. But like we know from science that colors are just a hex code, right? Like on a computer, you can put a series of letters and numbers in and get any color that exists.
Mm-hmm.
But we're humans. We like to give everything a name, and we try and make stuff because we can sell it.
Yeah, so, and I think it does come down to like it's our own definitions of like what is a quote unquote real game. Like as you said before, like you wouldn't have seen the attraction of Dungeons and Dragons until you actually played it, and then when you play it, suddenly it's like I'm really into this. Like I had a guy called Dust Monkey on a few weeks back talking about LARPs, like so live action role playing, and I think I've probably only ever seen like a few parodies of it on TV shows of like people doing Civil War reenactments and stuff. But then when he described it, like in the detail that he went into and like the excitement that like of what he was describing it, I was like, I want to do one of these now. Like it was just infectious, and it's never been something that I'd have considered like a way that I'd spend my time. But I think the thing is, it's a game if you play it and you enjoy it. And also the big thing is it just like I think that a lot of people need to be encouraged to. It's like, just not, we don't need to classify it for anybody else. You know, like we don't need to, like, we don't need to, it's like if something causes anxiety to somebody, right? It doesn't need to cause anxiety for me to accept that it's a source of anxiety for that person. And pretty much everything in this world is a potential source of anxiety. Some people could be anxious about like completely honestly random things, and I can't even think, I'm trying not to say anything in case someone listening is anxious to that thing and they feel like I'm trivializing it. But what I mean is like things that, like, you know, I don't know, like things that to one person don't cause any anxiety whatsoever. Like public speaking doesn't cause any to me anymore, but but social situations still do, and I've arguably been in more social situations. Actually, maybe not now. You know, I might have actually spent, because of streaming, I may have actually spent more time public speaking than hanging out with people. That's weird, but I mean, still,
I'm not wishing to dunk on the person who asked the question, but like, so based on that logic, though, so like, Pro Evo or FIFA are not real games, but Subbuteo is, because I'm playing that in like the offline world, but I'm also still not actually playing football.
Yeah, well, exactly.
There's a whole bunch of people that are now Googling Subbuteo.
Subbuteo is class. I never got very good at it though. Like I was terrible at Subbuteo.
I know, like you make a point, and I think, okay, so more opinion. I'm going to very, very, very clearly say opinion. I think one of the problems that we have, and it kind of derives from the discussion that we've had, is that there are two kind of models of, like, I've seen it through the lens of model of disability, but I see it parallel applied to mental health, is that you have like the medical model and the social model, right? The medical model is you have X, how can we fix it / cure it / it's kind of on you, bud, sorry, here's X, go away and we'll see you later. The social model is, okay, you're experiencing X, what can we do as a society to change it? Now, an example, and I'm going to give like a little sort of content warning here, because I don't want to upset anyone, but like think about the situation with women in the UK recently. I don't know about you, but I know many women that say don't like going out on their own in the dark. Okay. Now, if you were looking at it through a medical model, you would say, well, all these women just have anxiety. We should give them some medication, problem solved.
Yeah.
A social model view would be, well, actually, there must be something going on in society that is causing this. How can we as society change it so that these people no longer have this?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of, and quoted, you know, as a radical feminist, Dr. Jessica Taylor, who's a forensic psychologist that is specialized in harm experienced by women and girls, by men. Very specifically, I'm being very explicit about that definition, explicitly, very, like, you know, and like it talks about that, and it says, like, actually, you know, these things, it's more of a social problem than it is a problem, and it's called pathologization, of just pathologizing and saying, well, you have this, mate, so that's you, that's sorry. And it happens with disability. Like, I'm visually impaired, so medically speaking, it's like, well, we can't fix him because, you know, I'm broken, clearly. We can't cure him because I'm ill, obviously. I'm not just different. Well, there's nothing we can do for you, mate, sorry. You know, good luck out there, bud. As opposed to saying, well, how as a society can we make sure that, like, I don't know, text is large enough for you to see?
Yeah.
Buses could maybe read out numbers, or, you know, things like this. That always, socials always seems to come later, because society is much harder to move than an individual. So you get this kind of internalization of, well, oh, I must be the problem because I require additional or assistance or different assistance to other people. So, you know, even talking about anxiety, if something causes you anxiety, like, that's fine. How can we help alleviate that? And you're not trivializing it, you know, like you didn't want to give a specific example, you know, and that's fine. I think that's really sensible, because, like, that's the way it is. We're all individual, and it's not a problem if something affects you or resonates with you in that way. But it's like, okay, well, what can we do to alleviate that? Because everyone, firmly, in my opinion, has a right to live a happy and, you know, or at least a life where they have the ability to live as they want to live, where they're not hurting anyone else.
Yeah.
As long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else, you know, big caveats. But, like, you have a right to live how you want to live, and in a world that allows you to live how you want to live.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for anyone, like, it's a lot of these things, society only catches up when it affects them directly. So, you know, basically, anyone talking about ableism starts off like, first of all, starts off from having a disability, and then you get sympathizers of people that had a disability that might then start talking about ableism, and then eventually it filters down. And like, for example, with sexism, and as you say, what's going on in the UK right now, it's how on earth do you get like men to give a crap about that? It's like, and in reality, it isn't a problem. It's not a problem, a woman's problem. It's a man problem. What's actually happening? Again, content warning. I don't normally do them because it's an open discussion mental health forum. But while we've been doing them for the episode, I'm going to briefly mention what it is, just in case anyone wants to know the context while we're going off. And basically, drink spiking has been a thing for as long as most of us can remember. That doesn't mean that's not justifying it, by the way. But right now, the thing has moved along to injection. So it's like actually spiking people through injection. So for the last, basically, I'm going to say 10, 15 years, if not more, essentially the education has been around how to not get spiked rather than how to not spike people. It's like, and that's where the problem is. The problem has been that men primarily have been spiking women's drinks, and women have been getting taught for the last 10, 15 years how to conceal your drink, how to cover your drink correctly, like not to accept a drink from a stranger, and so on and so forth. We've and basically now I don't know what what the line of talk is there. It's like what are we going to suggest people wear injection proof pants or something? That's what they should do, because again they should. And now, basically, blokes, we can't understand this because we've not been targeted with it, right? But as a much smaller level, it's like if you look back at kind of sort of things like, let's say you leave your wallet on the seat in your car. Right, and then your car gets smashed into and your wallet gets stolen, and actually then your insurance company says, well, because you left the wallet on the car, on the seat of the car, we're not covering this. Like that type of thing has happened. We've been told forever, don't leave valuables on show. Imagine if you were told, if like your insurance company actually turned around and said, your house gets broken into, your TV gets stolen, and they said, oh, we're only going to cover you you've got a £1,500 TV, we're only going to cover you for £500 of that because it's your own fault for having expensive tastes in TVs. It's your own fault because you chose to have.
Dave, you had the curtains open, mate. It's your fault.
Well, there you go. Exactly. And this is the whole thing. This, like, it's trying to explain victim blaming to people who've never really been victims. It's like that's like
a great example I heard was, I think it was the streamer Sweet Anita. She put it as like, okay, so imagine that you had a collision with a car, you had a broken leg, and you came into a public space, like say the pub or a cafe or something, you came to see your friend and you're like, oh my goodness, what happened? And you're like, well, this collision happened, driver didn't look when he turned, not the end of the world. Imagine someone running up to you and your friend saying, hey, I'm a driver. Don't try and say this is my fault just because I'm a driver. How dare you? Drivers, you're not going to send me to driving school. And it's like, I wasn't saying all drivers, mate. It was just this one person. But there's this kind of reaction of, like we've mentioned, sort of social in-groups and out-groups of, like, if you're listening to this and maybe you're someone who presents as male going, well, it doesn't affect me. I haven't actively done this. I haven't spiked anyone's drink, so I'm not the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you aren't actively doing it, but like omission is also part of the problem. Like, like, and as you say, the narrative is how not to get spiked. I mean, like you can say, yeah, it's generally like a good bit of knowledge to not accept a drink that you haven't seen poured yourself. Okay, sensible. But the way that it is framed and kind of processed through society is like, well, if you're a woman, don't do this. Blokes, oh, you're fine. No one wants to spike you anyway. And it just blows my mind because it's just, I mean, the government won't make misogyny a hate crime because it would be too much work. But we'll try and put legislation in place to legally punish Twitter pile-ons. Okay, work that out. Because I can't. They just don't want to deal with the former, in my opinion. But yeah, like, and you just get this whole like, well, the weight of expectation is on you, in this case, the victim, to make sure you don't get harmed, instead of saying, actually, maybe we just shouldn't commit harm. Like, for me, bit of a disconnect there. I think the latter is definitely an appropriate course, but even as we mentioned there, with like, I sort of touched on it. It's easier to maneuver the minority than it is the majority. And because that's perceived as less work, people go down that track easier, which is why it's easier to victim blame and say, well, it's your fault because you're the minority, than it is everyone else accepting that social responsibility.
Yeah.
So video games and mental health.
Yeah, so video games and mental health, that's what we're talking about. Very quick thank you to Jen for the raid as well. I don't normally break interview to do that, but I do want to show my appreciation, and we are kind of wrapping up and coming to the end of this now. There weren't, I don't think, any more questions that kind of put in. But basically, yeah, virtual games, board games, outside games, word games probably is really just playing and having fun, and everyone's idea of fun is different, going back to what we talked about before. But yeah,
from like an educational psychology point of view, play is a part of humanity. Play is just a part of who we are. It's a part of being alive. Animals play. Humans are animals. We also play. Play is just natural, even whether that's just like messing about or whatever, but like play is just, it's natural. One of my colleagues actually did their thesis and passed it, and it was like bringing play back into the classroom, and it was like making that argument of like play is actually so important for development that like we should embrace play. There's this image that games are childish, and they're for children, and it's like actually fun is just ingrained in what we do.
Yeah, do you know what's really childish is depriving someone of something that's that could be good for their mental health. Sounds like if playing a game helps your mental health, that sounds like a pretty mature decision.
Well, I mean, again, big thing, COVID. Like, how many younger people were connecting through the likes of Fortnite and Minecraft, and that was their social connection.
Yeah,
they had to do it through the guise of the game because I mean, it's. I don't want to pick my words carefully, but I'm going to say more people maybe feel comfortable allowing their child to play Fortnite than sitting on a Zoom call with a group of their mates for various reasons. Maybe they feel more comfortable with that or feel that's a safer network environment. But that was their social connection. So it wasn't necessarily the game. It was just fueling that. You touched on ableism and stuff like, I don't like saying it, but like the COVID was actually really beneficial for many people from the like disability community, because as you say, because it affected everyone, companies were way happier to provide more accessibility stuff to allow working from home, which benefited a lot of people. I did my registration viva. I had to defend my research proposal online, and it was way easier for me. I could have my notes zoomed in on my monitor that's out of shot here. I could flick between them. I could have stuff highlighted that it was accessible to me. I felt much more comfortable being able to see the faces of the people that were reviewing me because I could have my screen zoomed in and actually be able to see them, as opposed to being across the table and maybe the lighting isn't great and not being able to see them that way. I had a much better experience, and I wholeheartedly believe I performed better because I could make it accessible to me at home. And I'm legitimately going to be arguing to have the rest of my Vivas, progression and final online as well, because it's actually just more accessible. Because even if I had a digital screen in front of me, I'd still be faffing about with it, and then that could potentially be viewed as distraction. But I wouldn't want to print my notes out because I'm going to have a ream of paper and that's going to be more annoying for everyone than me being sat here and being able to control F.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The big one that I found, which really happened early on, was once presentations and talks went online, you'd actually get much more people asking questions at the end. And also you would get... because you would get people asking the types of questions that you wouldn't have in a room. So you'd get people asking questions about social anxiety and such. You might and it's like, okay, if I was given a presentation to a room full of people, even if the topic was social anxiety, no one in that room wants to admit to everybody else that they've got social anxiety, and they're too socially anxious to speak up and actually ask a question in the first place. Yet those questions on Zoom conferences would come through. And I basically, one thing I've always said to people in Zoom conferences now is, even though I might not read the questions till the end, it's like put them in as we're going. As soon as you think about it, just put it in. So you're not having to wait for that moment and have to worry about whether someone else is someone who's more bold than you are, or is going to speak up faster or speak up louder. It levels the playing field a little bit, which is...
Yeah, the distance can bring us closer together, and that sounds oxymoronic, but it gives people more of a level footing. And I always say this, I've had additional support, and I had a note taker in university, undergrad. I had additional time in exams, and I had to spend a lot of time explaining to people that wasn't to give me an unfair advantage. That was to get me onto the same playing field that you're on, because of my additional needs. I'm not even on your level, and that kind of melts people's mine's a little bit because they're like, what? Like you, but and it's not. I'm not doing it to like ruffle, shake my own feathers a little bit, but like because you are seen as doing well. I was very, I worked very hard. I got first at undergrad. So people just go, oh, well, Chris, you just work hard. You're just clever. Again, we're talking about schemers. We like to just be binary. And it's like, you don't see the struggle there. It took me several years to get into my PhD through many like tears at being rejected and blowing interviews and stuff to refine the idea and work to finally get to that point of success. People who listen, if they're still listening, they'll record that bit of the introduction where I've just reeled off all these things I do and go, who's this fella? Who does he think he is? You know what I mean? He needs to calm down. That just misses out the years of strife and challenge that got me there, right? And it's easy to just see that end product.
Yeah.
And like, I think a lot of my peers kind of didn't understand the amount of extra effort I had to put in just to have the same opportunity that they did.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing is like, that's the, when we, I explained this to one of my clients yesterday is that we always compare when we know our entire journey, we know every word of the book of our life. That's been written so far, at least. And what we do is we compare it to like the glossy photos in the middle of someone else's. It's like that's what we're comparing it to someone. Like when people say don't compare your outtakes to someone else's highlight reel, it's like when we look at someone in a position of success, or when we look at someone with a certain level of education, we just see where they are right now. We don't see all the struggle that they've went through. And then it's when people say, oh, it's easy for you to say, or it's easy for you, and all the rest of it. It's like, nah, it really wasn't. Like but I think people want to say things like that to kind of let themselves off the hook a little bit from the fact that actually, but they do know their entire story. They know what they struggle with right now, and they don't know what you struggle with. And that's important to remember. Is there anything else you want to add on video games and computer games before we wrap this up?
Just like, help produce good science. Like, I'm not just plugging like my own study, but like, like if you can be a participant, do it. Like, as I say, the big move is that like we're doing much better, rigorous, open, reliable science. And like if you can be a participant for someone's study, like please do it. A lot of them are sort of like have like a gratuity in some sense, like, like you can maybe win a voucher or things like that. But if you can just contribute, look out for studies that are being done in the hope that you can sort of, because even just by doing that, you might have to play a game, you might have to fill out some surveys. But that's going to contribute to the data. That's how you create change. And getting participants is one of the hardest bits of research. And that's probably the best thing you can do, particularly if, and I'm imagining most people that maybe are listening to some interesting games relatively.
I'll play some mental health games.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you can help just be a participant, that's a big thing for research.
Yeah. Amazing. And if people want to kind of connect with you or find out more about you and what you do, where's the best places to do that on social media?
Twitter is probably the one. I'm pretty active on that as well. I've got like a link to all the other links like Twitch and YouTube and all that. So I'm at Chris L. Psych on Twitter. Just there. I post a lot of like memes and ramble on like aspirational stuff. Like, I don't necessarily have like a theme of content. I'm a bit of a pick and mix of everything. But,
I want some pick and mix now.
Yeah.
White mice, they're the one. I'm hooked on those things.
I mean, that's one of my nicknames. Person with albinism joke for anyone listening who hasn't heard the video. But like, that's like, I'd say the best place because all the links are there and I always post stuff to there. But I think just if I could give like a rounding off like message before we do finish.
Please.
Unfortunately, change is difficult. If change was easy, we wouldn't have things like therapy. We wouldn't have people doing research. I wouldn't be in a job. Change is really difficult, and we sort of touched on it just then, saying that the metric at which you measure your own success or against anyone else is the most important thing. And I think it's so easy to, and we talk about things like imposter syndrome and things like burnout are so prevalent in the creative spaces, in academic spaces. But I think the main thing is like, if something you do is a win for you, it's a win for you. And I think, there's a boundary between like boasting about things and being very public about it. Like, again, a uni example was I would never talk about what grade I got in an assignment. There'd be people that second the results came out on Facebook. I got a first, look at me. Like, that's congratulations, well done. But there are always going to be other people that might see that maybe didn't do so well, and you don't know how that's going to impact them.
Yeah.
You know, and that could have a really detrimental effect on a person, as well as it might motivate others. You know, change is hard. It's really difficult, and you know, you have to just do what's best for you. And my advice, the thing that I sort of cling to is like to be bold, because I would rather put myself forward for something and then maybe not get it or be unsuccessful than never have tried. One of the big, ironically, a TV show that really inspired my love for psychology was Frasier, and there's a quote from that from Marty Crane. And it's like, you know, it's not the times in life that you regret where you did something that didn't go your way that you regret the most. It's the time, you know, or the times that you made an arse of yourself. You know, it's the times you didn't bother to try that are the ones you maybe regret the most. And I always couple that with comedian Doug Stanhope. It's only funny if you do it. So I've done some daft things. Just be like, well, at the very least, I'll get a story out of it. You know, again, completely within the caveat of keeping my own safety and other people's personal safety as rule number one. But like, you know what? This might be a bit daft. Like doing this open mic night might be a bit daft. I might not be very good, but at least I can say I've done it.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time today. And I've really enjoyed getting into this. I feel like there's 742 other things we could talk about.
I'm a very opinionated person, unfortunately.
I'm just going to take the word "unfortunately" out of that. I think that's, you know, I often say this is like, it's the guests that don't have opinions that I struggle with, because it's, you know, you ask a question, the answer's very short, and the conversation never goes anywhere. Opinions are good and opinions are important, and ultimately everyone that's listening has an opinion on something. Like if someone's listening to a topic, it's probably because they already have an opinion on it anyway. It's like this is a little bit, I don't know how much of my podcast audience are interested in video games at all. The Twitch audience, yeah, most of them, because they're on Twitch. But the podcast, this will go to my YouTube and this will go to my podcast, and they're all three completely different audiences. So the ones that'll sit and listen to it on the podcast, well, they need to be interested in this topic in order to, and already have opinions on it. And I imagine practically all of them either have the computer games good or computer games bad opinion, and you know, it's like, and it's like, you know, there's not many people that tend to go, it sort of depends. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, there's a Stephen Fry quote someone else, but I always forget who he's quoting. But what one person would say in 10 words, I would say in 100, and that's me. As you've probably guessed if you got to this point.
Yeah, me too.
But you know, I think the other big thing is, like, I'm not yet a qualified professional. I'm getting there, but I love talking about it. That's why I'm doing a PhD. If you're not passionate, it's going to be a much tougher challenge, right? Yeah. And I walk blissfully in the footsteps of all the other brilliant researchers that have been working towards this and are on this mission. I've mentioned things like Take This and Safe in Our World, and the brilliant people that work in those places. They're the benchmark. You know, if I could give a quick shout out to like the likes of Dr. Rachel Cowart, the research director of Take This, Dr. Celia Hoden. I'm very, very blessed to be working with Dr. Linda Kay, who is one of the few sort of cyber psychologists in the Northwest that were willing to look at video games and supervise my, you know, project at all. You know, I'm, you know, your success is built on the shoulders of everyone who's come before you. And I'm a big believer in that you should use that success to then propel and lift up other people. Yeah. If you're trying to climb over a wall, you only need one person to get over to help the rest of you up. But if everyone is pulling at the ankles of other people, pulling them down, we'll never get over that wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Strongly agree. Yeah. And well, here's to the rest of your research and to the generation that comes after that learns from you and takes that even one step further. It's exciting new territory, and hopefully the science is going to start accelerating now, and we'll begin to see some positive improvements on mental health coming from games. Maybe even a game being prescribed for it.
I mean, you got to dream, and like doing things like this, as I mentioned, are really important to be able to have these conversations and talk about stuff in a way people can hopefully enjoy. You know, and yeah, it's a really big part of what I see as the job, you know, and talking about it. And I've got a couple of years to go yet, But there is a part of my heart that is very warmed by the idea of the fact that one day there'll be a student that's maybe inspired to look at video games and psychology and might put my name in their reference list.
Yeah,
that's the nerdiest thing I've said all day.
Amazing. I'm not even a doctor and all the rest of it. It's like, but I've managed to somehow get my name cited as a reference in two people's masters. So it's like on stage fright of all things. But there you go. It's nice when that stuff goes to when people go, actually, this is worth taking note of. This is worth, and if it becomes the inspiration for something that comes beyond it as well, it's like, it doesn't just, our impact. I say this to people all the time, your impact goes long beyond the moment that you're actually doing things. They say what things that you do today, conversations you have today live on in people's hearts. Research you do today will live on and might be the basis of someone else's someday. And actually, I personally think that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me on, Dave. I really appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure.